tell us your name and the schools your child or children attend or attended. As explained in our written procedures, the public comment period is not the appropriate time to present complaints. The board will only consider complaints that remain unresolved after they have been addressed through proper administrative channels and when they have been placed on the agenda. By law, the board will not be able to engage in discussion about or make a decision on any subject that is not on the agenda, and board members will not engage in extended dialogue with speakers during the visitor section. However, we do welcome your comments and concerns, and a staff member may be available after the meeting to address your concerns or comments, or to direct you to the appropriate person. Board procedures limit each speaker to a total of 3 minutes, and I will be the official timekeeper. A speaker may not take the time of another speaker. You'll see the slide in front of me change from green to yellow to red to indicate your time. When it turns yellow, you have 1 minute remaining, and when it turns red, your time is up. Please promptly conclude your comments at that time and exit the podium. Ms. Kesson, our first speaker tonight is Mr. Bill Ames.
My name is Bill Haynes. I live in the district. Our ISD curriculum is out of balance. Basic reading skills and TEKS, mandated course material have been de-emphasized, as clearly revealed by the across-the-board decline of test scores. Rather, Vision 2020 is concentrated on progressive education initiatives, 21st century learning, PBL, and increased use of technology in the classroom. As our ISD continues to implement Vision 2020, student performance continues to decline. The decline is consistent with a report from September 15th, 2015 from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. The study, Students, Computers, and Learning, looked at computer use among 15-year-olds across 31 nations and regions. The study determined that many students who use computers as a key resource in the classroom had both lower reading and lower math scores as measured by the Program for International Student Assessment. Board members, I suggest you pay attention to this OECD study. Richardson student performance mirrors its results. As our ISD implements Vision 2020, 15 out of 16 STAR test scores are down, 2014 to 2015. All 3 elements of the SAT scores are down, 2014 to 2015. STAR reading scores for grades 3 through 8 have declined for 3 straight years. Students in 4 of these 6 grades now read below the Texas average. Yet the reading shortfall in grades 4 through 8 is conspicuously absent from your district improvement plan. Conversely, 21st century learning, PBL, and classroom technology are all covered in the plan. From this, it is very clear that the district continues to focus on progressive education initiatives. Yet most would agree that reading is the fundamental building block for a well-rounded education. A quote from the executive summary of the report: that as long as computers and the internet continue to have a central role in our personal and professional lives, students who have not acquired the basic skills in reading, writing, and navigation will find themselves unable to fully participate in the economic, social, and cultural life around them. Board members, our ISD must restore balance between the implementation of progressive education initiatives and the critical requirement to teach the basics. Failure to do so does no favors to our RISD children. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ames.
Mr. Bono, do we have any other visitor cards?
No, we do not.
Thank you, Mr. Bono. The next item on our agenda is our consent agenda. Does any trustee wish to have an item pulled for separate consideration? If not, may I have a motion on the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bono. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Oliver. Are there any questions or discussions? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is an action item. Dr. Wagner.
The action item that we are bringing you has to do with a provision for issuing tax refunding bonds not to exceed $44,350,000. And just a little background information, our administration monitors debt on a continuous cycle throughout the year. And First Southwest, our financial advisors, also monitor and they make recommendations to our district. So we have identified an opportunity to issue some tax refunding bonds, and our order designates Mr. Harper as the district's authorized rep to approve final pricing. You do have an attachment with information. It's lengthy. It's page 35 through 68 in your board agenda. And we do have representatives from First Southwest here with us today. And at this time, I'll turn the mic over to Mr. Harper for some additional information.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. This is just part of our ongoing efforts for our debt, managing our debt plan, looking for opportunities to refinance where we have certain opportunities that meet thresholds for savings on our interest rate. We're not extending the maturity of these bonds, we're simply lowering the interest cost for them. So it's not that we're taking bonds that will mature in 10 years and then refinancing those for a 25-year period. That's not it at all. We're not extending any of the maturities as part of it. We have Ben Brooks with Braceville Giuliani, Julie Partain with Braceville Giuliani, and Nick Boulash with First Southwest are here to answer any questions about the order, the parameters that we've set, any questions that you might have.
And let me make the recommendation, and then we can open it up for questions. But the recommendation is for the board to authorize the issuance of $44,350,000 in these debt instruments as detailed in the attached order.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. We have a recommendation from the superintendent. May I have a motion, please? So moved by Dr. Kuhn. May I have a second? Second by Mrs. Greenhall. Are there any questions?
Just wondering, Mr. Harper, if you have any estimate of anticipated interest savings through the issuance of these bonds?
Our projected total debt service savings are $5.25 million. Present value projected savings as a percentage of the refunded principal is a little over 10%. So we're well above our threshold. Threshold for the parameter order is 5%. We modified that over time. It used to be as low as 3% on the threshold, but given the current low interest rate environment, we felt like that minimum threshold for us to be able to pull the trigger on refunding needed to be a little higher than that. So we continue to evaluate that. So it's significant savings for us with the refundings for these bonds. We would expect to price. The advantage of a parameter order is it gives us the authority to, when we go out and price the market, as long as we meet these thresholds, to be able to take advantage of that without having to come back and take action on the board's part.
Mr. Lynn.
Thank you. Mr. Harper, just out of curiosity, if we were to delay this for whatever reason and the Fed increases their interest rate, would that have an impact on the net savings?
It would.
It would. So it would be better to do it now before the Fed.
That's part of the timing of it. What we've done the last few years is we've waited because there wasn't a lot of upward pressure on the interest rates. We would wait and bring it along with a new money sale and have those two together. But we felt like, given the volatility in the market, you're having some fairly significant swings on a daily basis, that we would go ahead and lock these in. We couldn't bring them to you any earlier than that based on the call feature associated with the bonds. And so this is the first opportunity to present, but we felt like it warranted coming now.
Thank you.
There are no other questions? Ms. Greenhall.
Just a quick comment that, as always, we appreciate this aggressive management and the opportunity to save our district money and use our financial dollars wisely. We appreciate that.
We have a good team. So First Southwest does an excellent job of monitoring and managing all of our outstanding debt issues and bringing forward opportunities. Jeff Robert and Nick Boulash both do a great job on our behalf. And then with Ben and Julie, they do an excellent job for us as far as bond counsel and making sure that the orders, everything's in order and we're in compliance. So we have a good group pulled together.
Thank you, Mrs. Greenhall. I think we all echo those observations. And Mr. Harper, thank you to you and your in-house team and to our partners, First Southwest and Braceville and Juliana. We appreciate it. Okay, with that, all in favor, please raise your hand. And this motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is to consider maximum class size waivers. Dr. Wagner.
Okay, this is a standard item that we bring you at the beginning of the year if we need it. And I think most of you know the education code requires a ratio of no more than 22:1 for kindergarten through grade 4. And if any district exceeds that after a certain period of time, then they have to seek approval for a waiver from the state. But what we do each year, we survey shortly after the beginning of the year in the spring, we survey again in the fall semester. But we do have one class section that is above 22. We only have one elementary that's impacted. You do have 3 attachments. The first attachment is a form that actually lists the exception, and you can see we have one class at Lake Highlands Elementary in grade 3 that is at a total of, I believe it's 23. And then we have district class size averages for you on the second attachment, and that is on page 72. And then we have some historical data on page 73. And you can see, with the exception of the fall of 2011 and 12, our number of waivers has been fairly small. And again, that coincides with the significant budget cuts at the state level. So we are seeking approval for this. Any additional information, Dr. Medina, before I make the recommendation? Okay, our recommendation is for the board to authorize the administration to seek a class size exception for the one section that exceeds the class size limit established by the state.
We have a recommendation from the superintendent. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Oliver. May I have a second? Second. Second by Mrs. Bono. Are there any questions? Mr. Oliver?
I have a question on kind of the general topic of class size. Not so much at the elementary level, but at the secondary level. I know that I've heard comments at the beginning of the year, and it's a relatively common occurrence at the beginning of the year. I hear comments about large class sizes for some topics in secondary, and I'm just wondering if, I'm obviously aware that the administration's aware of those issues, and I'm just wondering if we have any lingering class size issues that we're aware of at secondary, or if we have managed to kind of manage those situations down.
We are going to have a report that we share with you later this week with some information regarding that. Just briefly, Mrs. Branham, anything you want to share? But we will have that information for the board later this week.
Yes, ma'am, that report will be ready on Thursday. One of the things that we're waiting on is that at the end of the first 6 weeks is usually when we will see some course changes in terms of students moving from AP to on-level or from on-level into some pre-AP and AP courses. And once we see how those drops impact the schedules, then we will work individually with each principal to balance classes as needed, or potentially make a recommendation to Human Resources and to Dr. Stone and to Dr. Wagner about any potential additional staffing if needed.
Mrs. Bono?
I appreciate the historical data that you gave us. That's very helpful. And you mentioned the fall of 11 and fall of 2012. Could you just give a little more detail on the huge jump in those 2 years, and is that something that would...
I will be happy to. The legislative session, which coincides with the fall of 2011, we had $5.4 billion cut from public education. And if I remember right, that impact to us was $14.2 million the first year of the biennium and $21.7 the second year of the biennium. So what we did, we didn't cut staff or programs or services, but we had a large number of classes that exceeded 22. And so most districts around the state did. Most districts ended up cutting staff. It was significant, I think, challenges for every district in the state. But we maintained program services. We just had large class sizes at the elementary level. And then the year following that, we added a number of staff. We did have some funds restored. At the state level, they restored $3.4 billion of the $5.4 billion, so it was partial restoration, but not full restoration. For us, I think we got like $6.5 million restored during that first year after that significant cut. So we were playing catch-up at the time, and in the last 2 years, we've been able to add the staff that we need. And we'll potentially, we may have class size waivers that we bring in, but we're certainly proud of being able to bring in one this year as compared to previous years. Does that help?
It's excellent.
Okay.
Well, and I just wanted to add that a part of that history is that at that time we did a survey with our staff and with our community, and we had extensive input from both groups that that was the philosophy that they hoped we would take, that we would protect our staff, and that they were willing to bear with us in those couple lean years, knowing that we were going to manage our way through it and that we could protect our staff and still serve our children adequately, and that's exactly what we did. But we did that with great input from both the staff themselves and our community, who understood that's what we were working towards.
Okay, if there are no other questions, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is to consider campus improvement plans. Dr. Wagner.
Okay, we are pleased to bring you the campus improvement plans tonight. We did save trees. You had the information on a thumb drive. And this is part of the process that follows each year, the approval of the district improvement plan. And Dr. Goodson had a chance, and Mrs. Brown at the last meeting, to share some information about our process. What our campuses did after summer leadership, they went back and revised and included the very specific things around the student performance priority goals. So it's been quite a process. And Dr. Stone and Dr. Medina and Dr. Goodson and Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Payne and Elvia Noriega and many of our executive directors, I mean, it's been a team effort in terms of working with our principals on establishing the plans. And I'm not going to go through the plans. I think you've had a chance to look at these. Dr. Goodson, Mrs. Brown, anything that you guys want to share before I make the official recommendation? Okay. Then I'm going to recommend that the board approve the campus improvement plans as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. We have a recommendation from the superintendent. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Kuhn. May I have a second? Second by Mr. Oliver. Are there any questions or discussion? Ms. Hall?
And I'm not sure which one of you would like to address this, but I know when we adopted the district improvement plan, there had been significant work done to update those and put some specific parameters and challenges for our staff. So could you just give us a couple examples of how that may have trickled down, maybe a secondary and an elementary example of how that what was incorporated in the district plan has now been incorporated in the campus improvement plans?
Ma'am, I have Lake Highlands Junior High CIP with me right here. And one of the explicit changes that they made as a result of the changes that we made in the district improvement plan in terms of increasing the number of students enrolled in Algebra 1 in 8th grade to that 40% mark that was identified in the district improvement plan. And then they have several different specific action steps that involve reaching out to elementary, increasing counselor awareness, identifying a mathematical fluency assessment that we can use in 7th grade that can potentially move students into a pre-AP course so that they're on track for that 8th grade course. All of those changes were made in the CIP as a result of the changes that we made in the DIP. That's just one of several I could identify.
I think on the elementary level, you see examples of how the alignment with the realistic measurable growth goals that we talked about before, but particularly as it relates to 3rd grade reading and 4th grade writing, obviously those are two of the main areas from the district level. And regardless of how the individual campus may have performed, what we have really emphasized, what the executive directors have emphasized, is everyone contributes to the district performance. And so while you may have a different goal at your campus, you still have to reach. You still have to be sure that you're targeting all of your populations. And so you'll notice that there are specific references to 3rd grade reading, 4th grade writing, in addition to any other target that's appropriate for that campus. So it's very, very focused and aligned.
Other questions? Mrs. Bono?
And the action plans on all the ones that I looked at were excellent, very, very well thought out. My question has more to do with as we have moved and tried to talk beyond just testing, et cetera, Can you explain how they come up, especially in the identified needs and the changes under the academic performance? They seem very oriented towards performance on testing. And so what has the conversation been around, yes, we want to get beyond just the testing, and we see that in a lot of the action steps. But could you just walk through a little bit of that for me, whoever is provided for that?
Sure.
And you guys can chime in, maybe Dr. Stone as well, but the campuses will have a number of different goals specific to whatever they're addressing. It might be the parental engagement, it might be school climate, it might be teacher retention, it might be survey data. So there's a lot of data which looks at the campus as a whole, and the goals are very specific to the campuses and the data. But student performance is a large portion of it, but it's just a piece of it.
So student performance, the academic performance sections will continue to be very focused on just the percentages and the numbers, and that is, and we're addressing our need to get beyond that through the other categories like the evaluations and this.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you so much.
If I could add, we're also, you'll notice in the CIPs, the focus on the retention, working with staff for the employer choice aspect of what we really want to focus on. The academic piece it definitely is the biggest piece. That is the number one focus. What we really want them to work on, though, is that there's not just one set of data. There's not one data source that determines how successful the students are. And so the principals work with the campuses and their campus improvement plan teams to really take a look at the entire picture as it relates to their campus, as it relates to their student experience. And so yes, there'll be items that are very measurable as it relates to lots of different assessment types, but we want them to really take the big picture and keep that in mind.
The only thing I would add to Dr. Goodson is that we also look very much at the enrichment pieces that we know a student would need to experience, for example, in order to achieve the ISD graduate profile. So one of the data sets that you will see in all of the secondary CIPs are what are specific action steps that a campus is taking in order to provide experiences that a student can achieve that graduate profile. So we do definitely try to address the whole child, both in extracurricular as well as in academic goals and action steps.
Mr. Bowman?
I guess building on Mrs. Bono's comment, that still needs to be said. What, and both of you can comment on this, and I think maybe what she's asking without putting words in her mouth is, obviously, the easiest way to measure reading success or writing success is the STAR testing, but I know embedded in there we have a focus on differentiated instruction, and so I guess if you could comment on how we're using that plan so that our principals and then the teachers underneath them can have the tools or have goals surrounding a focus on each individual child and what's best for each individual child, as opposed to just a focus on, hey, let's get everybody to make the test score. Does that make sense?
I can take that and then I will hunt for some additional information, but the district improvement planning process in the summer that is formalized in the campus improvement teams has a team of the principal and staff members, assistant principal, maybe some lead teachers, maybe some instructional specialists, and then that same process is utilized at the campus level. So just an example of what a campus will do throughout the year to monitor the plan and to implement the plan. At the beginning of the year, they meet with their entire staff, they meet with their departments, they look at the priority goals for the district, they look at student performance goals, and then they are looking at individual student data in terms of performance, not only on the state assessment, but our local assessments, benchmark assessments. We're looking at that data, and then based on where individual student scores, they may be pulled for a special program, they may be participating in an intervention group, they may be getting extra tutoring. So their instruction and their support and their intervention is designed based on their data. So a lot of programmatic decisions, both for entry and for exit, is based on the individual student performance data. So, and our principals have checkpoints. I know our executive directors and our assistant superintendents have checkpoints with principals just to monitor the implementation of the campus improvement plans. And Dr. Stone will be doing that at the district level, monitoring the implementation of the district level. So it truly cascades down from the district level to the campus level, department level, teacher level, all the way down to the student level.
One thing that I'm going to add, we had our principals together for 2 days last week, Monday and Tuesday, and we spent 2 full days talking to them about our instructional expectations. It was a wonderful time to align everyone with the focus. It was centered around those 5 instructional expectations that we presented to you at a September board meeting. And the I in that acronym of DRIVE is individualized instruction. And so we spent a good bit of time talking about what that looked like, talking about ensuring that our instruction was student by student. And we're putting some new tools in place this year to ensure that that occurs. And so one of the things that's going to be happening is we're going to be implementing iStation, which is a tool that will assist our teachers in individualizing instruction. And so as part of their campus improvement plans and their planning is how they'll implement that with fidelity at their campuses. But huge focus on individualizing instruction and is embedded in those 5 instructional expectations.
And thank you, Dr. Stone. And I'll just have to give a special kudo to Dr. Medina and to Dr. Stone for the 2 days training that really we worked with, embedded our instructional expectation piece and the district improvement plan and the goals within that leadership training. So it was about the real work, and it was very relevant and very meaningful. And the feedback that we got was that it was purposeful, it's about what we're doing, and just great kudos for the design of the program. So I have to recognize both Dr. Medina and Dr. Stone for the work during those 2 days. It was an excellent, excellent opportunity for us to talk about what we really do in a meaningful way.
Any other questions? With that then, all in favor, please raise your hand. And this motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is to consider the budget status report, the annual budget. Dr. Wagner?
Okay, we are bringing to you the status report at the beginning of the year, or prior to the beginning of the year. The board always adopts the budget and approves the budget in 3 areas: operating fund, the child nutrition fund, and the debt service fund. And then throughout the year, as we have changes within a given month, Mr. Parker will bring you an update and share that information with you. And this is an action item, but before I make the recommendation, I'll ask Mr. Harper to walk you through specifics, and then I'll make the recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. If you'll look at page 77, details the only changes on other plan changes. We have some increases in the budget. $499 relates to increased state revenues for fitness grants. The other increases are in relation to gifts that we received for visual arts and for Avid. And those are the only increases to the budget. The other items are on fund balance neutral transfers, where we're just transferring funds between functions within the same fund, so they're budget neutral. But I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Okay, our official recommendation is for the board to approve the budget status report as presented.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. We have a recommendation from the superintendent. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Mr. Bowen. May I have a second? Second. I have a second by Mrs. Greenhaw. Are there any questions?
So,
Dr. Kuhn?
yeah, Tony, just a couple clarifications, and I think you've actually probably explained this to me in the past, so I apologize if we're being redundant, but it always, on page 81, one of those fund neutral transfers that you were talking about, the line item that says student tuition public schools always throws me. Can you remind me what that is?
I'm sorry, looking at which one?
Student tuition public schools? Oh, page 81?
That would be, it could be several things. I pulled the detail on that for you. That could be where we're increasing the budget there. It could be for our payments to Plano ISD for their School for the Deaf,
Okay.
I believe is what that's for. Sorry.
JJ?
The JJAD is in a separate function. I believe it's has to do with payment to Plano ISD for their school through that, but I'll get clarification and I can send that to you.
Cool, thanks. And then it's just a wash down underneath, is that what?
It's just a wash,
Okay.
yes.
Got it, thank you.
Are there any other questions? All in favor, please raise your hand. And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is to consider gifts. Dr. Wagner.
Our gifts are found on page 83 and 84. And when you look on page 84, we have one item that we're bringing to you tonight for approval, one gift of $5,000 or more. We have 12 gifts that are less than $5,000. But if you want to look specifically at the gift, which exceeds the $5,000 mark, it's from the Prairie Creek Elementary PTA. And it's supplemental supplies for music and PEs, some various subscriptions, some additional printers, some substitutes for parent-teacher conference days. And the total cash received on that is $19,935.09. And the cumulative to date is approaching $300,000. And then the gifts less than 5 do not require board approval, but they are from a number of different organizations. You will see PTAs, banks, TI, Excellence in Education Foundation. You'll see state associations, booster clubs, anonymous donors. And the total cash for our gifts less than 5 is $9,513.17. Estimated supply and equipment value is $4,045.53. And the total for both cash and supply equipment value is $13,558.70. The cumulative is $67,290.92. And then the grand total of all gifts over and under $5,000 is $366,958.02. And then compared to prior year, we're up by almost $124,000 over last year. So again, the 12 gifts less than $5,000 are for information only, and the one that I will recommend approval of is the one gift that exceeds $5,000.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. We have a recommendation from the superintendent. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Kewen. May I have a second? Second by Mr. Lynn. Are there any questions or comments?
Just a quick clarification, if somebody could give me some color around this gift to Richardson High School, Excellence in Education. Are those supplemental books for AP Physics?
I would answer that as I'm sure they probably are, we just failed to put supplemental on there because our district purchases those gifts or those books that are required for the course. So this would be over and above, maybe for an additional classroom set or something like that. But our district purchases the books for kids.
Yes, ma'am, this is the secondary resources that the teacher asked for and on top of the textbook that's already provided.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hand. And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a policy review, CBA local, other revenues, investments. Dr. Wagner.
Okay, our education code requires through statute several things that the board has to visit and look at and review on an annual basis, and our investment policy is one of those items. And our investment committee has looked at this policy and are recommending some minor changes, and it's really a clarification of language. And if you look at the one change which we're bringing you, it's on page 3 of 9 of the policy, which is actually page 89 in your agenda packet. And on page 89, if you look at the section on investment training, we're simply clarifying that the initial training shall not be less than 10 hours and renewal training shall not be less than 8 hours. So that's a little more specific than the previous language. And Mr. Harker, any additional information before I make the recommendation?
That's just a change that came from a legislative session. They just dropped the training requirements after the initial year. So is the only reason for the change. And then the committee also looks at broker-dealers, financial institutions, investment pools, and training organizations as well. The only thing the board is required to adopt is just the changes to the policy.
You have a copy of both the legal and the local policy, and so the only thing the board adopts, as Mr. Harker said, is is the local policy. So I'm going to recommend the updated local policy CD8 for other revenues, investments for the board's review, and recommend that the board approve the proposed revisions.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. We have a recommendation from our superintendent. Do we have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Oliver. We have a second.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Greenhalgh. Are there any questions? All in favor, that motion passes 7-0. Thank you. That concludes our action items for the night. We'll now move to our information items on the agenda. And our first item tonight to consider on the information section is a bond planning update. Dr. Wagner?
Okay, we are going to bring you the bond planning update, and then following that, we'll bring the HR update. So we're flipping those two if you're looking at your agenda. And what we're really going to do tonight is just bring you an update on what we discussed with our bond subcommittee last week. Mr. Harkerode first is going to take you through the updated proposals and projected cost. And then Dr. Stone and Mrs. Hayes and I will share just some discussion points around some key items. And then Ms. Womack is going to give you an update on the thank you and listening tour and goes around the video, and we're almost there, aren't we? And then the last thing, we'll give you just some updated information on the planning calendar. You do have a revised copy of the one-pager, which summarizes the total budget recommendations or the total bond recommendations at this point. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Harkerode.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner, on that. Just to reiterate a few points about this document. First of all, it's draft, so this is in no way the recommendation that we're making at this point in time. We're continuing to refine the numbers, and we will be taking this information out as part of the listening tour and getting feedback from our constituents and the community as far as the items that should be considered as part of a bond package as we move forward. Middle column, middle of the page, total program requests. And again, we've broken those totals into 3 categories just for making it a little easier to digest. The first is the maintenance cycles category, those items that we would reasonably expect to reach end of useful life within the next 5 years. Then we have a construction category, and there are construction items that are both in construction and enrichments. The items that are in construction, the construction that's under the construction category relate to the proposed expansion at Richardson High, Lake Highlands High, to be able to accommodate growth. And then part of our process that we've gone through as far as renovation work, do I need to stop?
Yeah, Mr. Harkerode, we don't have copies of the sheet you're referencing, I think. The bonding. I'm sorry you don't have a hard copy. I'll get that for you momentarily. The first page?
Yes. Can you post it? Should be part of the agenda. There should be a page we can pull up so everybody can reference it electronically.
Thank you.
Will that work?
Even better.
Even better. Lost my page, man. All right, I'll have to look at it like everybody else. Under construction, I think that's where I left off. The items that are there, thank you, Trudy. The items that are there, expansion of Lake Highlands High School, Richardson High to accommodate projected enrollment growth are 2 of the items in there. The other items have to do with, in that construction category, if you remember going back to 2001, that bond, we performed renovation work at all of our campuses. We started with the oldest first. Those built in the 50s. So the 50s were part of the 2001 bond cycle. The 60s were part of the 2006 bond cycle. The 70s schools built in the 70s were part of the 2011 cycle. However, there were 3 schools that we could not incorporate in that 2011 bond that were built in that 70s time period. it's Aiken, Prestonwood, and Yale. And so we feel like we have made a commitment to those communities, and they've been very patient, and they are last in line for this. So we moved them into that separate category, and it's not end of life necessarily, but our maintenance cycle. But we don't consider it the same as an enrichment. It's just part of that commitment that was started back in 2001. So those are the items there. Everything else we've moved into what we're calling enrichments, things that go beyond the regular cycles and those construction categories. I'm just going to walk through some of the major pieces of it briefly, and then we can go into any detail answering questions that you have. Items that are highlighted in red continue to be items that there is some question about. We're either there's a question about an item that's included, or we're still quantifying some piece of that. So that number, that grand total number in the middle of the page, we're at $485,449,713. That number will continue to change. There will also be some movement between the maintenance cycles categories and enrichments. There's been quite a bit of movement already. There will continue to be some movement between those two categories and in the grand total as well. The biggest pieces, and certainly they're not in any priority order, but I'm just going to go down the page. The biggest pieces that are included in the proposed bond at this point are under athletics. That enrichment piece, $82 million, is related to indoor practice facilities, is what the lion's share of that total includes. And then a few extra curricular buses make up the balance. The indoor practice facilities are $81.5 million, and the balance have to do with some additional buses for extracurricular activities. The next large piece, the career technology education on the enrichment side. This is expanding the 4 priority clusters, I believe, is that right, Ms. Hayes, at all 4 of the high schools. Some of that number has gone down a little bit, I believe, because we were able to, the construction figure for Lake Highlands High School and Richardson High School for the addition would be able to incorporate some of the needs, the construction needs for the additional CTE programs. So it's construction at the other 2 schools plus the equipment that would be required for those is what makes up that item. If you go down to instructional technology, that is a fairly large item, and that will continue to, currently that figure includes moving to a 1-to-1 device ratio there. We will continue to have some dialogue about that. We can answer some questions about that tonight from you as well once we get through the summary. The library media services, it's really combined with that district-wide curriculum instruction, innovative instruction piece, even though that's not as large of an item, that $1.3 million. You really want to almost view those 2 together. That library renovation, what that will entail is really a complete renovation of every one of our libraries at every campus, and incorporating some of the innovative instruction equipment and configurations that have been identified as part of our campus reviews in other districts, and part of what we want to be able to provide to students. Everything from teaming tables and different types of furniture, modified circulation desks, additional technology. You'll still have books in the library, but just an expanded use of technology within those areas, and revamping those areas is why that price tag is so large. And then as you move down the page, certainly not wanting to skip anything, but just trying to hit some of the bigger pieces. Go towards actually the bottom of the page where we have the construction line, and as we move forward, we may need to think about changing one of the 2 of those. We have a line item, we have an X and Y axis, both of them are called construction. So We have construction within construction, and we have construction within enrichment, so we may need to think about that as we go forward. We already talked about the construction line that's under the construction category. On the enrichment side, that is, that's one of the items that there was a fairly significant modification to. That has to do with a non-traditional slash choice high school. We've reduced that scope fairly significantly, and we will continue to look at some different delivery options and price those options and bring that forward to you as we go forward. Within just the next few weeks, you'll see additional information there that you would be able to consider, and that what we envision as we take this out on a listening tour is getting feedback from the different constituents that we visit with about what delivery options they'd like to see. Is it a standalone facility? Is it incorporated within another facility? Lots of different options there, and certainly Dr. Stone can speak to that in a little more detail here in just a few minutes. But that number was about $35 million previously, and it's been reduced to 21.8. And then depending on the delivery option, it could reduce. It very likely could reduce further. So those are some of the major items that have changed. What we've done is there are a number of reductions. If you lay this schedule down against the previous versions that you've received, you're going to notice some of those categories that might have fallen. I'll give you an example. Athletics. Within the athletics enrichment piece, or within their numbers, they had included weight room renovations and wrestling room renovations, but part of the indoor practice facility cost includes renovations to the weight rooms and to the wrestling rooms. So there was some duplication. We had a few instances of that, so we've tried to eliminate the duplication. That's one of the reasons that the district-wide curriculum and instruction number fell, is that that had included a dollar amount per campus for a site within each building for that innovative instruction. And at most of our elementary schools, that site is the library. And at our secondary schools, one of the sites at each of those campuses is the library. So those costs were already included in the library media services number, and they were duplicated in that district-wide curriculum instruction number. So we were able to pull those out and reduce the total. So we're continuing to go through it. I know one of the board's requests and suggestions was that we want to take more of not a completely refined list out to the community, because we want to get input on the items that have been brought forward and determine what the community values, what they would like to see, instead of taking them more of a finished product. So we're not trying to completely vet the list, but we do feel like we have a responsibility to try to eliminate any duplications and things that just we don't feel like should go forward at all for consideration, if that makes sense. So I know I went through that quickly about some of the items that changed, but we would be happy to talk in greater detail about any of those and what has occurred, and go from there. Questions? And then one other page you do have is a single page. We've updated the financial scenarios based on the discussion at our last board bond committee meeting. We added a column on there to show you one of the drivers on this has to do with the number of assets, the dollar amount of assets with a useful life of 5 years or less that we can amortize, both as part of the 2016 bond and part of the 2021 bond. And just to refresh your memory about that, and for those members of our audience that weren't here at the earlier discussions, we've tried to match life of asset with life of liability. So a computer, for example, it may have a 5 or so year useful life. We're not using a 25-year bond to pay for an asset that has a 5-year useful life. We're paying down bonds to try to match the life of that asset. So that puts a constraint on us, and we think that's a good practice. Don't get me wrong, not complaining about it at all or critical of it, but it does put a constraint there. So what we've done is we've shown you, not only in 2016, but in 2021, what would be your threshold or your capacity for short-lived assets you would be able to amortize in that 5-year period at both of those levels, just so you can see what the impact is. Questions?
Okay, one thing that we wanted to bring to you tonight, just to give you a snapshot into where we are in terms of our discussion and the conversation that we're having. Some big ticket items that I wanted to bring to you tonight. One is technology, and one is schools of choice, and then the third item is the multi-purpose practice facilities. And I think we'll start first with schools of choice. And as Mr. Harkleroad went through this and looked at the different categories of maintenance cycles, constructions, and enrichment, you know, initially we put on here for consideration and for discussion, certainly not in final form, is to consider a choice school which would house a non-traditional program as well as an early college program and some other additional supplemental things for staff development and all. And since then, since initial discussion and looking at the total bond package, we looked at downsizing that in scope and what it would cost for simply a facility of choice that housed a non-traditional program and an early college academy program with some collaborative spaces. And then something else that we're also considering and looking at is, would it be possible to provide that as a pathway at each of the high schools? We do have some limitations on space right now. The only campus really right now that could currently house that with space is Berkner. They have some room. We have limited room and really no room available to do that at Lake Collins High School or at Richardson High School, but that can be addressed during the construction phase. So that's also on the table for consideration. So we'd love thoughts and feedback. Dr. Stone, anything you want to add before we open that up?
No, you know, other than we did make the presentation to you on September 14th with the campus that was estimated to cost roughly $35 million. As Dr. Wagner said, since that time we've had a considerable amount of conversations that have led us to rethink the scope of that design. And so there are several options, as she had mentioned. I did want to further go into a little bit more detail to make maybe a stronger case than we've made before about the need for a non-traditional space, either in a standalone facility or to add on to an existing facility. We have a real need in Richardson to provide space for our non-traditional students. As a reminder from the presentation we made on September 14th, that we're the only 6A school district in the state without a non-traditional high school setting. Currently, we are only able to serve 65 students due to the limited capacity that we have and only able to serve them in our evening classes. And so if we were able to build either a non-traditional high school or add on that additional space to an existing facility, we could do so with just using 4 classrooms and providing services to those students through flexible scheduling in morning, afternoon, and evening classes that would serve approximately 360 students. And so the options that we've been discussing would either be to build a standalone facility in the same space that we presented earlier, which would be on Greenville Avenue over between the administration building and the annex. If that standalone facility was built, we envisioned it being a 2-story building that would be 4 classrooms on the bottom floor, an office area, a cafeteria, and then potentially a 2nd-story building, and that's the cost that's in the construction cost of $21,830,000. Or for you to consider us to be able to add on additional classroom space, office area on an existing facility, such as the annex building, which is currently located on Greenville Avenue. And so we're open to different options with the imperative of us being able to expand services to our non-traditional students. We will be providing them classroom space this next year, but this facility would open in 2017 with the 4 classrooms.
Board members, this is a time to ask questions. It's also a time to give a reflection. So what I'm hearing is, from an early college high school standpoint, is that the model and the pathway is something that we feel strongly about, but not necessarily building a separate facilities. This is a part of the conversations that we're having. Is that correct, Dr. Stone?
Yes, we definitely support the model and hope in the future that we can either move forward that with the 2-story building, which would be our vision of how we would serve students on that 2nd floor of that 2-story building, if that's the direction the board decides to go. And we can further talk to you and answer any questions you would have about the early college model. We definitely still support that model, but if that is off the table, if we decide not to go that route for the 2-story building, then we would just move forward with needing to add on additional space to serve the non-traditional.
Reflections, Dr. Keown?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Stone. I think you spoke very well about the need and the compelling why for a non-traditional program. I get the supply side. I guess I don't necessarily see the demand side, so I'm just wondering if you guys could speak to that. I know that you've had some rate limiters and capacity constraints in the past, and so, you know, with 364 classrooms, can you speak a little bit to the why?
Absolutely, thank you, Dr. Keown. Actually, this week alone, we had 4 students who had presented different life circumstances that caused it. They needed an accelerated path to get that high school diploma, and unfortunately, the night program does not allow them to access that. Or the current design, because we only have 65 seats, for example, we only allow seniors. Or age-appropriate seniors, as well as we have limitations on the number of credits that student needs to have on their transcript in order to be eligible, because again, we have to have some filter. I know these 4 students in particular, if we were able to expand our non-traditional program and offer it to a wider variety of students, based upon their circumstances, that all 4 of those students could have been served if we had an AM, afternoon, or a PM session. We also have been working with our counselors who have identified lists of students that they know that they would love to work with and counsel work with and target for this program if it was something that was available to them as an alternative to potentially dropping out or withdrawing and choosing maybe an alternative program at a different school, that we would be able to keep them here, house them here, serve them, and provide them with a quality education that would lead ultimately to an RISD diploma.
I'd further say that in talking with our counselors, and I should have covered this, and I'm sorry that I didn't, that really we found that we have a growing number of students who are falling into 3 categories. Students who need to work to provide for their families, so they need a flexible schedule. Students who need or want to graduate early, and students who simply don't feel that they can learn in a traditional setting, and so they're potentially a dropout. And so those are really 3 big categories and populations of students that are growing in our campus. And just one thing that I would say, back from my experience of being a high school principal 15 years ago, I'm sad to say, but a long time ago, I was the person back in Mesquite when we had students who would withdraw from our traditional high school and enroll in Mesquite Academy, and that was 15 years ago. And we had a large number of students that would go to that as an option, and I can still see so many of the faces and remember so many of the stories that were just students who needed to have that as an option. And so the fact that we don't have that is just a real compelling need for us to really revisit this as an imperative choice for our students.
I'd just like to add that part of the program design of this also involves a significant counseling redesign for the students that are in that program. So that there are counselors that are specifically working for those students based upon the circumstances that Dr. Stone just identified. So they work with them on that transition into work to life, or if there are other personal services that they need. So it's also an opportunity to really provide a well-rounded program for those students to ensure they're successfully transitioning beyond earning that diploma. So it really is a comprehensive program redesign. It's not just expanding to 4 classrooms and adding a number of seats. It's really designing an entire kind of program of service around making sure that these students' needs are met, both socially, emotionally, and academically.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And it sounds like it's very much aligned with the goals of the board when it comes to personalized learning for each of our students. So thank you for that clarification. And one thing that you said, Ms. Branham, and I just will throw it out there as a quick clarification. If there is capacity, you said something about age-appropriate seniors, would it be within your vision of this non-traditional choice high school to also provide dropout recovery services in that same program design?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Oliver?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some reflections. I appreciate the thought that has been put into, looking at ways that we can do this more cost efficiently and ways that we can incorporate it into our existing operations and processes. I think that we need to continue to look at that because I think the challenge, just providing reflection here, I just think that this is going to be a difficult thing to explain to the community and get them to understand the need. I think the need and the aims of this are beyond reproach. There's nobody that would question the aims of a program like this. As I've mentioned in a meeting a few weeks ago, it's really just a question of the opportunity cost. So we're going to do this, that means we can't do something else. And I think as I've talked to some people in the community and what I expect that we'll hear as we take this out is that seems like an awful lot to spend on a small number of students, and before I even think about supporting you in doing that, how can you make me feel comfortable that you're taking care of the basic blocking and tackling of making sure that we've got adequate classroom space and enough chairs in our classrooms? Really basic stuff, right? So I think we have to make sure we just have to make sure that those basic needs are being met with what we're proposing to even begin to have the conversation about this. And then the only other reflection I wanted to give is that I think we just need to kind of tread lightly with the argument that we're the only district in 6A district in the state that doesn't have a program like this, because we have other areas of uniqueness where that might be the case, and yet we have not gone down that path. We're probably one of the few districts in the state that still has 6th graders in elementary, but we haven't let that bother us, right? So I just think that that's an interesting data point, but it in and of itself is not a, kind of a deal closer in terms of making this argument. So I guess just to sum up here, I just really think we need to continue to look at any way in which we can incorporate this into our traditional high schools and come up with a way of doing this that is true to what we're trying to do and yet is as efficient as possible.
So, Mr. Oliver, this is for my clarification. As a colleague then, are you referring to early college high school? Are you referring to non-traditional high school? Are you referring to both?
I'm referring to both, and whether or not we need to build a new facility to do that, and associated with that new facility then have an increase in our operating costs, because a separate facility to do this may or may not be as efficient. It sounds like it's probably not quite as efficient. It may be the best way to do it in terms of fidelity, but it may not be as efficient as incorporating it into our traditional high schools. And what is that impact on operating going to be? Is that something that we're going to be able to handle? So that's really my you look at spending, even if the number is down to the $20 million range, still a lot of money. It's still money that can't be spent elsewhere. And is that where you can invest that money to get the greatest return across the broadest number of students? Right, is the way I'm looking at it. So.
Okay. Just a follow-up clarification question. If I understood correct, that $21 million was still a standalone facility with the basic 4 classrooms and the cafeteria to serve that with the potential to build out second floor. You mentioned a second alternative as to adding on to the annex. What's the budget factor there and what does that look like generally?
We're working on trying to cost that out.
Okay, so we don't know that yet, okay.
Is it less than $21 million?
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the questions I've gotten in the community was the question about the current Krista McAuliffe space that we have and whether there was ability to build another wing, a second floor, a freestanding building next to it somehow. And can you just update us a little bit about what that footprint looks like in that space and what options we may or may not have available to us at that, from a space standpoint there?
That footprint is very tight right now. One of the reasons that we would suggest considering building, if we build a building, even if it's an add-on to the annex, one of the reasons we would suggest at least considering making it a 2-story structure initially. If you build a 1-story structure like Krista McAuliffe, it's not as simple as going in and adding another story. The structural steel at that site and the roof girders will not support the weight. It'll be cheaper to tear it down and build it than add on a second floor to that building. So if you ever thought you would need the additional space, it would be far cheaper to go ahead and build it as a 2-story building, include the elevator shaft, include the foundation that it needs, include the structural steel that it needs throughout. Then come in and try to retrofit at any point. But Krista McAuliffe, the site is really maxed out. There's not any meaningful space. The program, what they're using there now is maxed out.
Thank you.
I guess one point of clarification to build on what Mrs. Greenhill says is I don't want anybody to walk away thinking that it costs $21 million to build 4 classrooms. So $21 million includes an early college high school on the second floor and a non-traditional high school on the floor 1A.
Correct. $21 million means a 2-story building that would have a full administrative office suite at the front, would have 4 classrooms and some collaborative space, a fairly significant amount of collaborative space, a dining area, their restrooms, elevator shaft, that we could accommodate the second floor. Second floor, we would be able to accommodate up to 10 classrooms plus some collaborative space, restrooms there as well. All of that would be incorporated in there. And there would be a lecture hall included. It would, it's far more than just 4 classrooms.
And then, I guess on the non-traditional high school, Ms. Branham, I'll just direct this to you, but anybody feel free to jump in. I mean, I think one of the things that may be hard for us to kind of wrap our head around, and probably, the community even more so, is, what the group of kids that we're serving through that versus who we're serving through the early college high school. So, I mean, is it fair to sum up that, that our non-traditional high school is serving kids with or the majority of those at significant dropout risk or have dropout? Is that an accurate assumption?
Yes, sir. These are students who are significantly at risk for dropping out. They're significantly behind in their credit attainment. They could be a senior that potentially have 14 to 15 credits, and without an accelerated pace where they can get through more courses in an accelerated timeline, they would be at risk of dropping out, not earning a diploma, being a 5th or 6th year senior. They are students who potentially have struggled with potentially an addiction and are in a process of going to therapy or needing counseling. And so part of the day they're in that program, and the other half of the day they're receiving instruction so they can remain in school, still be working towards a diploma, but also be meeting the social and emotional needs that they have. So it's a variety of circumstances that these students are dealing with, and they need a flexible schedule. They need to get through their courses at an accelerated pace that's individualized. So a student may be taking 2 or 3 courses at a time, and instead of it taking a full 18 weeks of instruction, they might complete it through a self-paced digital program, and they might be able to finish that in 5 weeks. So they can actually earn 3 times as many credits in the same amount of seat time that it would take in a traditional environment.
And so obviously we have a shortfall from, we have a shortage of the number of seats we have available to offer this today. Do we have any feel for, our success rate? I mean, the 65 kids each semester that we're serving, how many of those were, pushing through the program and therefore preventing them from dropping out?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a very strong success rate of the students who join the evening program. I can actually tell you in this first 6 weeks, we already have 3 graduates that successfully earned a diploma with us and otherwise may not have without this type of program designed for them. I can include for you in this week's board report the past 5 years how many graduates earned one of our 4 high school diplomas as a result of CMLC and the non-traditional programs intervention.
I don't normally get to do this, so I'm going to hop in. One of the questions that I have, and Mrs. Brannon, you described the current situation is limited to seniors, and we have a limited number of course offerings. What is the from, which is the current state, and what is the to? What would be the ideal? If we could craft this program, what grade levels would we serve? How many more courses would we be able to offer? What would this program look like, a robust but non-traditional program?
Ultimately, what we would love, right now, currently we identify and target seniors first. If we have open seats, then we will occasionally, by student basis, look at other students. As we think about designing this program for full implementation, we would like to open the opportunity up really for students 9 through 12. I will tell you, in my personal experience as a high school principal, we also had students who, even beginning in 8th grade, were showing significant risk of dropping out. And sometimes we had those students enter into the non-traditional program for a semester just to get caught up or to accelerate so that when they transition back into the traditional environment, they felt equipped and were able to make that transition successfully. But ultimately, our target would be 9 through 12. Again, we would have a defined criteria. This would not be something that a student could just wake up one day and say, that's where I'm going. They would have to meet certain criteria. There would be counseling that would be involved. There would be an interview process that would happen with their family, as well as with the student and the non-traditional administrative team to ensure that is this the right fit. If we graduate you early, what is your post-graduation plan? They will have a 9 through 16 plan as well, because we want to make sure that they transition either into work or career or ultimately into college as well. Many non-traditional students will graduate and continue on with a license, a certification, or a 2-year or 4-year degree plan. Again, that 65 seat, the main limitation for those 65 seats is that we only offer it in the evening. And we're limited to the evening because the Chris McCullough Learning Center during the day is used in its maximum capacity to meet the needs of our discipline placements that are made there. Next year, when we move it to temporarily, we will be able to offer it up to 120 seats at all 3. That will help us to determine, what is that nice supply and demand need as we think about continuing to scale it forward.
So then the range of courses that are offered, it's currently limited to senior level courses only. And as you expand it to other grade levels, that's what drives the breadth of the courses.
Yes, ma'am, and we currently at all 4 high schools already have or what we call our credit recovery lab spaces, where students who are missing 1 or 2 credits, again, we try to catch them before they need it in an alternative setting like a non-traditional environment. And in those courses, we have almost every course that you can imagine available, and that would be available at the non-traditional environment as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Bono, I'm going to go to this side and then we'll come back, I won't forget. Mrs. Bono?
So I really am thankful that we have success in that program, and we look forward to being able to address more kids because I know they're out there. My question, I guess, would be making sure I understand this also is that other than our space constrictions, which I understand are real, what are the benefits of building our own building versus trying to expand? Is there a negative side to trying to expand it within each of the individual high schools.
You want me to take that up first and then ask you to, we've had a lot of conversation about that, and we've looked at data as well. And back to Mr. Oliver's point and his thoughtful reflections a while ago in terms of this, is this something that we could do with each of the high schools versus a standalone? I guess our vision on where we would like to go in the perfect, or not the perfect, but certainly a place to move to that would really reflect quality. We thought if we could utilize one location, we could really capture the efficiencies of teachers who were invested in those programs. And so rather than a teacher who was teaching 1 period or 2 periods a day at the high school, at different high schools, it would be a full schedule, certified teachers who are there and invested and want to be a part of that program and capture that efficiencies in staff. And then also, when we look at space and you look at, as I said earlier, really the only campus right now that could house that as an add-on space is Bergner. We would have to include that in the construction cost at Richardson High School. We would have to include additional space in the construction cost at Lake Highlands as well. So you have those individual costs. And then when you take all of those things out and you just look at the data, I have to say Mrs. Brown, I don't know how much time she spent in looking at a number, I would say 40 plus programs, and looked at the data on graduation rates and course exams, all of those student performance pieces, and the standalone facilities, the students outperformed those programs that were housed at different campuses. So in terms of capturing the efficiencies, having the staff who are dedicated and committed and want to be a part of that program, and having students who are teaching full loads in their course area versus serving a smaller number of students at a high school level with teachers working that in as a period or two during the schedule. That's really something that we've looked at. Even if it's an add-on to the annex, that's still a standalone facility. It would be centrally located. It would be kids coming together that really have a niche that they have the same goal. So that's really just, I wanted to clarify that a little bit earlier and add the data piece that we looked at. Because when all else fails, sometimes you just have to go back to the data and you go, okay, what do we have here? What are our limitations? What do we want to be? How are other districts doing it? And how are the districts that are doing it well doing it? So we've looked at a number of different data points. And so I know that you were about to say something, Mrs. Brown, but I wanted to jump in and say that up front.
No, thank you, Dr. White. The only thing I would add is that what we really want to be sure that we do is address a comprehensive program. And yes, while our number one goal is to ensure that our students achieve academically and they earn the credits that they need in order to be successful, we recognize with these students, with the needs that they are presenting to us, they also really do require additional services. So one of the things, for example, really quality non-traditional programs do is they embed job skills training. What does it mean to have a quality interview? What does a quality job application look like? Some of those additional skills are embedded into that AM or PM or evening session, again, to ensure that students are successful beyond just earning that diploma. And it allows for the counselor, the teachers that are embedded in that work to become experts in really supporting students who are sometimes experiencing significant life challenges, and really counseling them and guiding them and coaching them in all areas, not just in that credit attainment. And I think that's what's unique about potentially having it in one space versus having that significant of a program at all, replicating that at all four.
Any questions? Okay. Mr. Bono, I did not forget. Oh, Mr. Love.
I just actually have one more just to understand a little bit. On the early college high school side, doing that on our 4 campuses, I'm trying to wrap my head around the facility issues that causes, because in my simplistic thinking, I'm thinking that the students are already there, they're going to be taking either dual credit classes through normal means or through an early college high school means. How does that impact the facilities, and why do we not have room for it except on one campus?
In terms of if we potentially wanted to explore putting an early college high school model at all 4 high school campuses, the space constrictions are not that significant. What happens anytime that you create a cohort of students, you have you introduce a little bit of inefficiencies because the numbers don't break out perfectly where you're going to have 25 to 30 to a room. So there are occasionally going to be a room or two that you lose in inefficiency. I think absolutely we could address those through. I think Pierce, actually JJ Pierce would probably be initially the one that we would have to be most creative in working with Mr. Bates and his administrative team to identify that space, but it could be done. It's just really, thinking about the space, if you have an administrator and a counselor that's working just with the early college, again, making sure that you have a space for them identified in that area. But I think those are things that we could absolutely overcome with just a little bit of creative space planning.
And your question was early college, not traditional, okay.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes, ma'am, I have some questions that are unrelated to the early college high school, but they're more about the worksheet that we have up here, so I'm happy to wait if we're still talking about that.
Hold that thought for just one moment.
Yes, ma'am.
What we'll do is we'll wrap this conversation. Mrs. Greenholm. Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
So I'm wondering, since we've been working on philosophically some more creative ideas, in the past we've employed some kind of creative strategies for space needs. We've bought a church, we bought an office building, we've used some non-traditional spaces, and I'm just wondering what ideas we've explored in that, where we have throughout our city some vacant properties that we would simply need to renovate versus starting from scratch and building a new bricks and mortar, and what some of those ideas that we've explored and what we can consider in that arena.
Mr. Walker, you want to share some information on that?
He's looking at me, so I guess I'll answer that. Well, certainly we can explore other options, and I think that's what we're indicating tonight, is that we're in the process of doing that. The problem with space, if you take an existing space, it's difficult to find a space that will exactly meet your needs. And so if you go in and you buy, I'll use Security Row as an example. We're selling that building because it's antiquated and no longer meets our needs. The cost to renovate that building would exceed the value of the building. So there are sites that are for sale. You're going to be paying for the dirt, really, as much as anything. The building itself, our experience, we've bought 2 buildings that were served other purposes that we converted into our space. Our spending on those were significant. So we just have to do a cost benefit analysis on it to determine whether it's more effective to buy an existing space and retrofit it as opposed to making it what we want to make it. But certainly that's an option to consider.
Thank you.
Any other? Dr. Kim?
Thank you. And I know you were able to articulate some things for me about the non-traditional high school program, and so I guess I would just love to hear your responses for the same for the early college. Like, when you guys looked at your assessment of supply and demand, can you speak to that and why you guys felt like that particular program was something that would help move the district in the direction of the goals and the vision that we have?
Want to speak to that, Dr. Stone?
Well, first of all, I'll talk a little bit about some clarity about the model that maybe we haven't provided before, and then I'll let Mrs. Brandon talk a little bit about the need. First of all, to be clear, the early college high schools really create an overall college feel and culture on a campus where students receive tutoring, supervision, counseling, and guidance from a dedicated early college high school staff. They're created and sustained by school districts in partnership with a higher education institution, both who are jointly accountable for the success of the students. So that's part of that model. The early college high school, or the ISD, and the higher education, the system, jointly collaborate to develop the integrated academic program. And the goal is for all students to graduate while earning 1 or 2 years of transferable college credit, leading to college completion. And we estimate that if we were to build a facility, as if we had projected with the second floor of a 2-story building, standalone building, we would be able to serve approximately 500 to 600 students. So So that's sort of the model, some clarity about the model that as how we would build it, and I'll let Mrs. Branham talk a little bit more about the need.
As we've had preliminary discussions, we believe we approximately between 100 and 150 students per high school that would identify a need either for an alternative setting other than a traditional high school. And when I'm saying alternative, I do not mean the non-traditional. I mean, would just like to experience high school differently. The things that engage many of our students about a traditional comprehensive high school maybe are not what engages them individually, and so having a choice, having an opportunity to choose to learn differently would be something that they were interested in. And with our Vision 2020, with the identified college and career readiness goal that has been established by the Board of Trustees and our superintendent, Dr. Wagner, we believe that an early college high school would be a instructional program model that would provide choice for students who wanted to learn differently, but then also be a significant contribution in ensuring that our students were on that strong pathway of college and career readiness to potentially have an opportunity to graduate with significant college credits under their belt with, as Dr. Stone mentioned, a strong comprehensive program that gives and equips students who maybe traditionally, maybe it's a first generation college-bound student. It specifically provides them instruction and skill sets and strategies to be able to navigate that world that is unknown to them, would be something that we would see as an asset for our ISD.
Ms. Branham, you may speak a little bit more about the data that was collected, about the success of the early college model that we have collected in terms of all of the campuses across the state, and the rich data that we've collected that demonstrates success for students.
And I think actually at TASB this past weekend, I believe Commissioner Williams and many others spoke to the successes that we're seeing not only across the state but across the nation in early college high schools. And what I think is important to note in the data that we shared with you, we did share data sets that showed the success of our early college high school programs that are standalone in a separate campus, and then we shared data with you. As Dr. Kewen and others have pointed out, it's important to note that when you're an early college high school that is embedded on a larger comprehensive high school, it is very difficult to cull out. They don't report that student performance separately from the larger high school. It's not a cohort that is reported separately to the Texas Education Agency. But what we know, whether it's a program that's standalone or a program that is a school within a school, is those students have a significant, their graduation rates are increased, their attendance rates are increased, discipline numbers go down, EOC scores are increased. Even our students that participate in a school within a school model, their performance will outperform the cohort that is not a part of the early college high school model. And then our schools that are standalone early college high school models, I think the data that we presented to you did speak to itself in terms of EOC performance, the number of dual credit hours and associate's degrees earned, as well as graduation rates, et cetera. So this is, again, not a model that is, this is something that has been tried, it has been true. We have longitudinal stories that tell us what tremendous opportunities this provides to students of many different experiences and backgrounds, and what it does for them, again, not just academically, but also personally and what they would like to pursue post-graduation.
So 2 more follow-up questions, and then I'll yield the floor. Thank you, Madam President. So I think you addressed this in the last time you brought this forward, but it would probably benefit from a further discussion around how creation of an early college high school would or would not impact the expansion of dual credit and AP at our other 4 high schools.
Yes, ma'am, we just had another meeting about that today. We are in the process. We had our first design meeting with Richland Community College, and we are really completely expanding our dual credit offerings that are available at all 4 high schools. There will be a full complimentary course catalog available to students who, let's say they have their own transportation and would like to schedule a dual credit course that they're choosing or a concurrent enrollment course, they will be able to do so as well. We have also worked with Richland to customize an AM and a PM session where we will be investigating transportation, what that might look like in terms of operating costs for transportation, but where we could provide transportation for our students at all 4 high schools to take those courses that are designated. Additionally, the University of Texas offers a hybrid program that is a virtual program as well as a face-to-face. It involves a teacher on our end as well as a professor on UT. It's a program called On-Ramps, and they offer numerous different courses. A student who successfully completes that course actually earns a transcript from the University of Texas. So that will also be a part of the program of studies that we will be making available to all 4 students. In that program of studies, we have showed the opportunity where if I'm a student, really beginning that sophomore year, I could make course selections that could ultimately result in me earning a associate's degree as well, if that was something that they aspire to do. They have to be a little bit creative and take some summer courses and maybe do a few virtual courses along the way, but it is absolutely something that would be achievable for any student at any 4 of our high schools.
Thank you for that clarification, and that's a perfect segue. I think all of us have been reflecting some on what we've been hearing from the community, and one of the questions that I think I have heard repeatedly is, doesn't Richland already do this? Why do we need another early college high school? So if you guys could address the why behind that, I think that would be great.
Richland has an early college high school program, but it's Richland's program, so we lose our kids from our district when they enroll in that program. And I think we've talked for a long time about the need to have our own program and maintain the kids. And I think as we move forward, the more element that we can offer in terms of choice, an element of choice in our programs, both for the non-traditional route as well as the early college high school route, is something that will make us more competitive among our neighbors and among our friends and across the state. And besides that, I think the more important thing is going to be really designed and tailored to meet the growing needs of individual specific students. I mean, we have students who need to be accelerated. We have students who for a number of different reasons, on all ends of the spectrum. And so I think an element of choice for our students that meets their needs is something that we need to look at. And I know that one of our goals is destination of choice and employer of choice. And the more choice that we can offer students, I think that's attractive to families and to students looking for places to live and invest.
All right, so, go ahead.
The only other thing I would like to add is that the Richland program targets just juniors and seniors. So it's not a 4-year, fully comprehensive program targeted to any student who would be interested.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. Mrs. Greenhalgh?
Just one follow-up. I just want to say that I'm encouraged by the creative thinking here that's going on, and that certainly the early college high school option as a graduation pathway is something that I think you've demonstrated we have need for in our district and will be a good option. But I share Mr. Oliver's concerns about how we do that in the most economically feasible way. So that continued opportunity to really explore and be thoughtful and creative is a great conversation, and I appreciate that you all are really looking into that.
Thank you, Mrs. Greenhalgh. I don't think I could have summarized it any better, and that's what I was looking for to conclude this part of the conversation. And absolutely, as we continue to explore these 2 pathways, both early college, high school, and non-traditional, and then looking for the ways that we can best efficiently and effectively deliver these services to our students. So, Mr. Lynn, I'm going to ask you a question real quick so we can figure out where we plug your questions in appropriately. Right now, we're talking about 3 initiatives. We're talking about early college, high school, non-traditional. Then second, we were going to talk about the technology portion, and then finally wrap it up with multi-purpose. Are your questions related to those, or is that something that we should conclude at the end of those 2 discussions?
No, they're not related to those.
Okay, do you mind holding those and we'll finish these?
Not at all. I would only add that ditto to what Chris and Lynette and you said about this discussion. I have nothing more to add.
But not Mr. Bona. I'm just kidding.
No, Mr. Bona said it.
There we go. Thank you very much. You toss that up. You toss that up, and I couldn't resist. Thank you very much. We're good on that. So, Dr. Wagner, the next segment that we're going to discuss is technology.
Yes, we've had a lot of discussions about technology. I think all of you know that technology is a substantial portion of our bond request. Our last bond, technology made up 30% of it. We've had a very strategic plan where we have looked at devices for teachers and students and programs and implemented those on a 5-year cycle. We have a very aggressive payoff schedule for technology items. We try to match the life of the bond with the life of the asset. So looking at the things that have been purchased in prior bonds and looking at our needs right now, we've had a lot of discussion about access and how to best provide access for students. And so we've talked about one-on-one at the individual level. We've talked about classroom sets. We've talked about hybrid models. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Hayes if she'll walk you through just in terms of recommendations of some things that we're discussing right now. This is really similar to the discussion that we just had on early college, high school, and non-traditional, because a lot of different options are out there. And so we need to look at needs of our students and maximizing efficiency and realizing that whatever we invest in terms of technology and we pay off on an aggressive schedule with our bond in 2016, that will impact the future capacity for those same items in future bonds, because you can't stack and pay off everything up front. And so we have to be mindful not only about capacity and needs now, but also with future bonds. So all of those thoughts and considerations have been a part of our discussions. And also we need to differentiate between those items that are end of life and those that are enrichment items. And so we've been having a lot of discussions around that. Mrs. Hayes, would you like to share some of your thoughts regarding technology, and then I'll ask Dr. Stone to as well.
Thank you, Dr. Wagner. When we talk about devices, we've had many conversations about what equity looks like and what kind of devices need to go out in our classrooms. And as you know, what we try to do is match the device with the instructional outcome. We don't want to just put devices out to have them out there. And so when you look at that, we have a hybrid model already in place here in our ISD that we will need to continue. We have some campuses that are already one-to-one, and that's part of their cultural model and philosophy of that school, so we want to keep those moving forward. We know that we have some choice programs that we need to look at for types of devices. What kind of content is going to be created by the students drives a lot about the device. While an iPad tablet is nice, in some instances it does not allow for the creation of some content with video and audio and things that students do, so that would not be an appropriate device. So we have to look at what the need is and the device it matches. And so for our model right now, some examples that we have been discussing over the past couple of years, we've done some research in our Technology Advisory Committee, as you know, and we have a lot of subcommittees that did work the past 2 years on types of devices, what they would be used for. We have teachers and students and parents on that committee that help us with those decisions. We're looking at classroom sets at elementary, make the most sense. Those students do not move around, so those class sets can be placed in the classroom and match the number of students that are in those classrooms, so they would have access. A lot of tablets, mobility. As you know, that's where the technology industry is going, so right now we know that's an iPad or a Surface Pro for Windows. We hope that there's research and development going on, and in 2 to 3 years there'll be a new device that we don't even know about right now that will be less expensive and more powerful. And that's always what we're looking for, but we can't predict that. We know that in some of our curriculum areas, for example, science, across the board, secondary science, tablets lend to their curriculum because it matches all of their science equipment. So that would be a good curriculum area to place tablets in across the board for science to be using. Social studies has a lot of content that relies on devices. So we would look at social studies as across the board some type of a research device, and perhaps a Google Chromebook or an iPad for that. And then there's instructional labs that have to have desktops because they have to have a very powerful device that works with AutoCAD and the Mayas, the big industry software that we run. So we have to continue to refresh, and those are on our cycles that we already do now. Teachers and administrators need laptops to do their jobs, and that's on the refresh cycle that we have to continue. So those are the type of decisions that we've been, devices discussions that we've been having.
Dr. Stone?
I would just add that this is just another issue that we're being very thoughtful about. Rather than just saying, let's go one-to-one, we are really having some deep conversations about the changes, what changes that would bring to the classroom. And there's lots of research out about one-to-one and districts that have done it successfully and those that have failed. And what is so important is that the culture of the classroom and the delivery instruction, you have to build capacity for that. You just can't go out and put a computer into every student's hands and expect that to have any kind of impact on performance or instruction. We really have to do a lot in terms of our classroom culture. And so we are having lots of discussions about that in a lot of different arenas. And so I feel we'll be really solidifying that plan and bringing it back to ensure that whatever direction we go is going to be what's best for our students. So wanted you to just be assured we are, like the early college, non-traditional conversation, and having a lot of in-depth conversation about this topic as well.
And just to reiterate what we said from the beginning, to take these conversations out on our listening tour and to get feedback from our community and our constituents about what they value and what's important to them, and to truly engage them in the process and to let them help make ultimately our recommendations to the board. The final call on the bond, how much it is, what items are included, that's certainly up to bond or up to board approval, and we're going to be bringing you recommendations. And so we're looking forward to the feedback from our community and engaging the community in some of these similar conversations, talking about options, talking about data points, talking about total dollar amount, talking about single referendums or multiple referendums, and letting our community weigh in so that it truly reflects the values of our community and parents as well.
Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up question, because as you were describing the hybrid model and different devices and tablets to match instructional outcomes, I understood the why behind it, but then I started picturing the guys that are in the IT shop at my job and how they would absolutely go berserk if they had to service and maintain all those different types of devices with software and everything else. And so I guess I'm just hoping you can speak to the cost to maintain a hybrid model. And I guess is that part of what you guys are evaluating when you're thinking through some of this?
Yes, and we have the hybrid model already in place and do sustain that. And if you recall, because we don't have our own technicians, we pay our computer vendor that handles all of our equipment a services fee to do that, the break fix for us, so they help maintain those devices. So we currently have the hybrid model. We have laptops in the hands of students, Chromebooks in the hands of students, and iPads in the hands of students right now. So we are used to that model in this system.
So am I right in assuming that we might, like if we went to a single device, and I'm just saying, I get that it's a philosophical choice, but if we did that, we could realize some efficiencies as far as maintaining the equipment?
Certainly when you go with one device, the IT department is going to be very excited. Anytime you can handle a single device, a single image, but that is not the model that we currently have, nor is that the model that we anticipate moving forward, because we do base it on instructional.
Got it. And I'll say my IT guys are really good, so.
Sweetheart?
Well, I'm wondering about the component that goes with this conversation about our staff and the ability to get them ready to have that a more hyper-engaged technology environment. Clearly, there's a professional development component and a movement of staff along the continuum and what that looks like. And I'm sure you're having those conversations, but can you just share a little bit about what that looks like and how we have that as part of the consideration?
There's a huge professional development that will go along with this initiative, and the stages of that will be to begin to gauge readiness of the campuses. Say if we're talking about our high schools, to begin to gauge where our current teachers are. So in terms of the listening that we would be engaging with in terms of our community, we would be doing a lot of listening from our teachers and from our administrators about where our current teachers are. So it would almost be an individual gauging of the readiness of individual teachers and the staging professional development to meet those individual needs, to meet the teachers where they are. And we would be looking at, say that if we were to move to one-to-one or to whatever model that we're moving to, we would be looking not to move into purchasing or putting devices in students' hands the first year. We would spend the first year in preparing our teachers and the campuses to be ready for that one-to-one model, that implementation coming into the culture of the classroom.
And I would just add to that, that there's going to be a phase-in regardless of the number of devices we land on, whether we refresh just existing devices and add for no growth, or whether we add more and we change the model of how, what we're looking at. It's going to be a phase-in for all 5 years. There will have to be devices purchased, just like there is, we've been on that same cycle now since 2001, so that's not going to change.
Mr. Oliver.
Why are we considering one-to-one? What's the rationale behind that?
At this point, we're really not. We're looking at a hybrid model.
So the money, the 29 million, is just to fund a hybrid model?
It's going to have some clarification, but that's looking at classroom sets at the elementary level, some one-to-one for specific program areas or choice models. It's looking at a hybrid. So that total dollar amount reflects end of life on some items and then enrichment on others.
Well, the 53 is end of life, right?
And we're still having discussion about whether some of that money needs to stay in that column or move. The total dollar amount probably is one that we're looking at, but we're still having discussions about what fits in end of life and what is in enrichment.
See Mr. Harper run.
Mr. Oliver, that if you look at the total of $82.4 million, that's moving to the one-to-one.
Across the district?
Yes.
Okay, and why are we doing that?
There may be some exceptions to that, but that is moving towards the one-to-one.
No, that also includes that the 82 million for instructional technology includes devices, peripherals, and software.
Right.
It's more than just devices.
Right.
So
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
53 million is not just for devices. It is for sustaining the existing software that we have to purchase in order to operate the district, and the peripherals, printers, projectors, scanners, document cameras, the things that are in the classrooms.
Right. There's, of that 53 million, you have 35.8 million are devices, 10.4 million are peripherals, 4.7 million are software refresh, 300,000 is district audio visual solutions, and then you get down to enrichments. It's about 6.2 million of devices, almost 12 million of peripherals. So there are a number of things in there, but it's moving towards that one-to-one on ratio, but it includes other items in addition to the device.
So it's not to achieve one-to-one. So, because moving towards one-to-one is just more devices. I'm just trying to understand.
It's to achieve access and equitable access as most appropriate for.
That's fine. I've heard one-to-one, and I just think we need to be clear. The 29 is not a device for every kid, right? That's one-to-one, and this does not do that, or does it?
The simplest of what it doesn't mean that it's one-to-one for every student to take home 24/7 access. That's not what that number means.
Well, I think Ms. Hayes is the best person to answer that question, really, so instead of myself or anyone else, but, so what does that number include?
The 82 million that was originally turned in included $40 million for a one-to-one program as described by 24/7. So every student would have a device assigned to them and they could take it home 24/7. We later had the discussions, we really weren't ready for that. Did we need that? That was not necessarily the best model for us, and so that's when we went to the hybrid discussion. So the 35 million that's currently part of that $53 million total for devices is refreshing what's already in our campuses and making room for some additional classroom devices for elementary and some additional 24/7 devices for programs of choice. And then sustaining what we currently have in a hybrid model. So there could be carts of machines out there, there will continue to be labs, there will continue to be teacher devices, all those would continue with that. Part of the 29 million that's over on the enhancement side would include the extra money if you wanted to go a one-to-one program 24/7, the same type of device across the board. That's the discussion we had, what the one-to-one program meant for us was the equity piece. Every student had a device available to them at school.
So $82.4 million includes one-to-one, 24/7
Okay.
access for a device.
Plus all the additional peripherals and software that's required.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Chris, thank you. And I'm not cutting you off, I'm saying thank you for that question because I did.
I mean, I know a lot of districts have done one-to-one. I don't think I've ever seen data, even for our own district, the campuses that have one-to-one, whether or not there's performance there that would indicate that's something we want to deploy more widely. I know that it kind of gives you an upper constraint in terms of, you know, it's a number to be aware of. If you wanted to go to one-to-one, that's the number. But I think there's just a real question about whether or not that is something we would want to take to the community, because the question would be, well, why? Why do you want to go to one-to-one? And we would need to have a pretty good, you know, cogent argument about why we're even sharing this option with them. So, and I'm just not aware of what that argument would be. So.
And again, I just want to clarify, that's ultimately not going to be our recommendation. I mean, it's going to be a hybrid model. And we have one-to-one in some of the programs, and we have classroom sets that it may look different in science and social studies than it looks in ELA and language arts. We talked about classroom sets in science and social studies, mobile devices for ELA, and then we talked about one-to-one with programs of choice, but more about equity and access, but it's not, ultimately, I don't see that being where our recommendation is going.
Okay.
So I know that I just want to make sure that
That's
we
good.
understand your question.
That's fine. I guess I'm trying to understand the rationale for some of the numbers that are here, but I'm also communicating that I think we want to take this information to the community and get their feedback, and it certainly, when we do that, will not be settled by any means, but I don't want anything on here that we don't feel good about from a strategic perspective. I wouldn't want us to have the money on here for one-to-one and share that with the community if we don't think that's the right thing to do, is what I'm saying. So I think it sounds like there's going to be some more filtering of that's going to happen to get that number closer to where your recommendation is going to be, which I think is good. So I think we're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Mr. Lynn, do you have a question, sir?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Stick with me for just a second on moment, for just a moment. Never thought I'd say this, but when I was in school, technology was a real luxury to have. I remember in 1986, I was staring at a monochrome terminal in a computer lab at my elementary school, and the teacher came in and told me about the Space Shuttle Challenger. Clear as day, I remember that. And that was cutting edge stuff back then. And there was, a couple of computer labs, and we all had to take shifts and do all that stuff. And when I got into high school, got into, I think it was algebra, maybe chemistry, I can't remember which, but a scientific calculator was required. The school didn't provide that. My mom had to go out and buy me a scientific calculator. And that was really the only reason I was able to keep up with the other kids, was because of that. And I used it. I had it up until about 3 years ago. It was an old TI scientific calculator, great piece of equipment. And so when we're talking about technology, and to Mr. Oliver's point, I understand we're not going one-to-one, but we're having those conversations about utilizing technology in our classroom instruction. I remember going to Lake Highlands High School in the spring and going into an AP English class, and there was Chromebooks on the desks, and I remember asking the teacher, I said, "Do you use these?" And he says, "Yes, I use them every day." And I thought, that was a really great, innovative strategy in a classroom. And a year from now, Chromebooks may be obsolete. And I think that's what we struggle with. We will struggle with as a board. That's what I will struggle with, is this number that is, to me, it's astronomical. 53 million and then 20, was it, 29 million post enrichments, justifying that. Because as technology improves, the Chromebooks that we have today will be, not just obsolete, but they'll be much, much more inexpensive. And so I think we have to make a case as to why we're using this technology and how we're using it in our classroom to teach our kids. And to me, that's 21st century learning. And that's something I can understand, that's something I think parents can understand and really wrap their heads around when we start talking about putting technology, including that as part of this bond. And so, it's much more of a comment rather than just a question. But I appreciate the conversation that we're having about this and the deliberate thought that we're giving this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. So what I'm hearing is what Mr. Bono says often, which is, making sure that we can paint a visual of what we want for our students and how technology plays into that and creating that compelling why. So thank you for that observation. Mrs. Bono, I didn't want to pass you over. Did you have any questions or comments or anything? Mr. Bono? Okay, so I think Mr. Oliver really summed up well, our direction and how we're moving forward with this and evaluating technology and what we do want for kids. So, Mr. Oliver, thank you for that. Our last large initiative that we were going to discuss tonight, just to provide a perspective, is multi-purpose facilities. Dr. Wagner, did you have anything that you wanted to share with that and reflections back from the board?
Had a lot of discussion about multi-purpose facilities, both among staff and with the board, and we've taken some site visits to look at different samples, and we're going to continue to do that. But looking at, in fact, just had a lot of conversations with, of course, Coach Doobie as well as Mr. Bradford, and for really, I think our most compelling reason is looking at providing access for our kids and an opportunity for them to practice and engage in activities regardless of what the weather is like inside or outside. We are going to continue to explore that. One thing that I think for us as a district, if we have an indoor practice facility at one high school, then we have to look at access at all 4 high schools. It's not one of those things that you could build one in a central location and really have adequate use. I think it would be a nightmare in terms of scheduling. It is a high dollar cost. And so we're going to continue to evaluate size. We're going to continue to evaluate use, models. We're taking another field trip this week and we'll be bringing recommendations back to you. But that is something that I think will be a critical element in the community engagement stakeholder meeting, that these things are being considered. It is part of our discussion. Tell us what you think about it. We have a lot of kids who are involved not only in athletics and in fine arts, but drill team and our country and western dance teams. The multi-purpose facilities are used to support kids in numerous different extracurricular activities. But it does come at a cost, and so that's something that we will be looking forward to having some, I think, healthy dialogue in our community meetings. And Dr. Stone, Mrs. Branham, anything you want to add to that? Ms. Caston?
No, I think I think that's a conversation that is a work in progress. So we'll look forward to that. Mr. Lynn, I did not forget. Do you want to pose the questions that you had, and then we'll conclude this part of our meeting? Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Kuhn. You gotta jump in.
So just as you guys are doing this, I know you guys are doing site visits, can you bring us some information, or bring the community some information about the utilization rates of those spaces in the other districts that have them? Like how occupied are they, what portion of the day? And then I would love to push the envelope on our thinking around those spaces as well, and think about not only how our students can use them, but how they could be community spaces within our feeder patterns. And so just to have you guys reflect on that and bring some of that back to us, either in partnership with cities or even within the feeder patterns. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kuhn. Mr. Lynn?
Yes, ma'am, I have 3 questions. Number First question is, I really agree with taking this list out to the community to get input on it, not having a finished product, and then getting that feedback and allowing us to make an informed decision. I think that's a critical element as we're moving forward. We're talking about an awful lot of money, and I think we really need to we all get, I think, individual feedback from the people that we know in the community, but I think there's a lot of other people who are interested in this list who don't necessarily feel comfortable with attending our board meetings or comfortable in talking to us directly. So I think it's a critical element. So I just wanted to kind of discuss that real fast about who are we targeting and what is the schedule for those listening sessions.
We are going to be covering that in just a moment, Mrs. Womack. I am so sorry, I keep calling you Mrs. Miss Womack is going to be discussing that. If you can hang on to that, we'll give you some key dates on that.
Perfect. We'll be discussing this financial also upcoming, or should I ask that now?
Mr. Hawker, I walked through that briefly a while ago. Did you have questions?
I did. The only question I have is that the number that we have currently for $236.5 million seems to fall between the number 1 and number 2. So I was wondering if the number 2 is the effective raise in debt rate by 1 cent was 257 million. So does a half cent get us to that 236? Or is that even a possibility, or what?
You can raise it to, we have to carry the decimal on the rate down to 5 characters. So
Okay.
we can raise it 1/100th of a cent. You can raise it any amount you want, up to the cap. So you could, if we were at 236, and the cap would be 235. I mean, you'd have several options if you're about $1.5 million off of that number. What I would probably say is that we would I wouldn't raise the debt tax rate for $1.5 million. I would consume a small amount of additional debt service fund balance, or use capital projects, or do something, and don't put a burden on the taxpayer for such a small amount. Like that, if it's a fraction of a penny.
Okay, thank you. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Okay. So Dr. Wagner will move to...
Just 3 more quick stakeholder committee. We anticipate getting names before the end of this week to finalize that. And then I'll ask Ms. Womack to just give you a brief update on plans for the listening tour and video, and then the planning calendar and key dates.
And ladies and gentlemen, I will say at this point, before you stop, at the conclusion of this discussion, we will take a short break. So just to look for something to look forward to, but certainly not to impact your presentation at all.
Thank you, David. Yes, we've alluded to a listening tour planned for the fall, and I'd like to take a moment to just unwind that a little bit for the audience and for the board. The listening tour really has 2 purposes. We are going to give a staff presentation in 2 parts. The first part is to say thank you for the investment done through Bond 2011 to really illustrate the impact of the work and the return on the investment of the community, to highlight the benefit to the students across the district, and to take a moment and just honestly, truly say thank you to our community for their support in the last bond. And after we do that piece of it, we'll move into a highlight look at Bond 2016. We'll use some video presentations, and staff will talk about items to be considered. And then at that point, we'll ask for the public's input. We'll have some comment cards available. Staff can answer questions, and definitely look to hear from the public as to their priorities and some of the other questions that Dr. Wagner mentioned earlier. So that's the purpose. We'll be starting that listening tour in the next couple of weeks, about mid-October. We'll run that through December, and at that point, we will be sharing feedback with the board as we collect it. Certainly, we'll update at regular intervals.
Any questions or comments about that?
Just, I also just sort of touch on where those, some concepts of where those are going to be, maybe who's going to be included and invited to be participating in those, and the kind of depth and breadth of what that looks like.
Absolutely. We have more than a dozen of these meetings scheduled across all 4 feeder patterns. We are talking to groups like Rotary Club, Exchange Club, different constituencies within the district like booster clubs, League of Women Voters, those kinds of groups out in the community. We are absolutely, I like to say, getting out of the building here at admin and getting out into the community and really purposefully listening. We are also going to have a number of open community meetings. We're aiming for probably 1 in each feeder pattern. So if a member of the public who maybe isn't affiliated with any particular group that is on our meeting schedule definitely has that opportunity to come and share their thoughts and their priorities for what is being considered.
And are any of those going to be targeted directly at our staff members where they can come and participate, or will they be asked to fill in those opportunities?
Yes, ma'am, I'm glad you brought that up. We are going to talk with our campus leadership beginning in October. We will certainly reach out to the campus level, the instructors and the support staff, and we can also definitely invite them to the open meetings in their feeder pattern. Mr. Oliver.
Just a couple of questions. One, maybe Dr. Wagner or Ms. Womack, I'm not sure the right person, but the makeup or the anticipated makeup of the stakeholder committee and how that group is being filled out. Could somebody comment on that?
Sure, I'll be happy to, and we're going to utilize members of the budget review team as our core and then extend that to other members, and we have opened that up for recommendations from trustees, so just waiting on finalization of recommendations.
Okay.
We want to be sure that we are very diverse, that we have representation among all feeder patterns, and that we represent a number of different organizations and groups within that.
Okay. And considering, I mean, some of the obvious folks for invitation to that, the band booster club presidents and athletic booster club presidents and those kinds of people, are we reaching out to? I don't know how big the committee's going to be, but I'm just kind of, if you could just share a little bit more about the kinds of people that you're thinking about involving in that.
We're waiting on recommendations from trustees for those very kinds of representatives. Wanted you to be able to weigh in and to recommend people within different feeder patterns that you think would contribute, so we're waiting on recommendations. We've been strategic about some. Part of the budget review team itself is strategic in having recommendations, or not recommendations, but representation from all 4 feeder patterns with a number of different groups represented. And already on that committee, we have a number of different groups represented, and we've shared that with the subcommittee. So just waiting on recommendations to give you some ownership and the people who serve and to round out that committee.
Okay. And I'm happy to give that, but I'm guessing Mr. Brenner probably knows probably better than I do from the RHS area, that, you know, those people, or I know some people, he knows other people, or the high school principals being involved in that as well.
I know that Mr. Hawkerwood has touched base with high school principals.
We go every year, we reach out to all of our principals for recommendations to serve, and the group it would be about 60 people total. Mm-hmm. So we try to maintain some balance within the 4 feeder patterns. So we don't have an over-representation, but then you have members fall out, and we've tried to do a little bit of rotation, so it's not exactly even, but we do try to achieve that. So yes, we reach out to each one of the building principals and try to get a recommendation, not just a name, but somebody that they've reached out to determine that they would actually be willing to serve. You know, we're not looking, we don't want somebody to just give us a name of 50 people, and then we have to try to, you know, contact them to find out, you know, they've never heard of who we are, what we're doing, or anything like that. We really want someone that's been vetted and that has expressed an interest in being willing to do this.
Now, are you talking about the process for the budget review team, or specifically for this stakeholder group?
Well, that's the process we always go through for the budget review team.
Okay.
So we just see this as an extension of that.
Okay.
So any nominations that the board might have, in addition to names we've already received from building principals, we reach out to inside our ISD. There are a number of venues that we use to try to reach out and find people that have an interest and a willingness to serve.
Okay.
So Ms. Womack, what I'm hearing then is that we will have our current parents, those who are actively engaged in positions of leadership within their campuses where their children attend. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And then, yeah, my last question is, Ms. Womack, do you envision, I know that the list that we see that's on the screen here, there's some refinement of this that needs to happen and some culling down, but even beyond that, in terms of kind of simplifying this to some degree and getting it into a format that's easy to present and talk about, do you envision kind of some packaging along those lines before we take this out for our listening tour discussions?
Right, we're in production with a few of the subjects that you've heard about tonight, one of those being multi-purpose facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So what we are trying to do is give the public some information about how we currently hold practices or prepare for a performance and how it could be if they elect to make the multi-purpose facilities a priority in the program.
Okay.
So we really are trying to use our subject matter experts in-house. Our Director of Fine Arts and our Director of Athletics have both been very generous with their time and really helping us to illustrate what these facilities could do for our district if that is the choice of the community.
Right.
One thing that we've talked about, and actually it was Mr. Hargrove's idea, as we were struggling with how to best group the items, is to have, to talk about it in terms of end of life and cycles and replacement. A second category being what we see as a need as it relates to growth of our student body and needing additional capacity at campuses. And then the third box, so to speak, would be the enrichment areas, which would really respond to some of those guiding questions that we started with at the very beginning of the process. What do we want for our students? So those are really the three chunks, and within those chunks, we're going to be addressing through communications the big ticket items.
Right. Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I guess to say it another way, I think the columns make sense. It's the rows where I'm thinking maybe those could be combined into some larger stories, if you will. If there are things you're trying to do in some of the core subject areas, perhaps bundling together some of the things you're wanting to do in terms of, let's take math for an example. There's a math line item, perhaps there's some things in instructional technology you're wanting to do in the area of math. I just think that as opposed to just having these rows, which mean a lot to us, but may not mean as much to people in the community, that there's some work that could be done to package those into programs or projects that would be easier to understand. So that's just my comment. I mean, I think clearly the big ticket items need to be broken out and video or whatever we can do to help people understand that. I'm just saying beyond that, if there are things that we can group together that fall under a common category that we can help the community understand that we're talking about making an investment in this subject, whatever that might be, then I think that would really be beneficial. I think the other benefit of that is that, just the time constraint in these listening sessions of having to explain what's under each of these rows, some of which are pretty small, I think it would just be easier to talk about it at a meaningful level of investment. So that's my perspective on that, and just encourage you to the degree that it makes sense to do that. So
we've used a graphic in the past, like a pie chart, for example, and what we've done is like curriculum and instruction. Instead of having all those individual lines, we would roll all those together into a category. So we can do it both ways. I think it's good to have the detail because I think there are going to be some questions, particularly on the enrichment side. We really don't anticipate spending a lot of time. I think most people understand cycles and things reaching into useful life. So, do we need to debate whether we're going to replace the roof at XYZ elementary school? Probably not. We won't spend 2 minutes on that part. I think the construction piece will go very quickly, but I think the enrichment piece, I think they're going to want, packaging it, as you're saying, just to give them kind of an overview, and then making sure that we have the detail that they can bore down into so that they know, well, what is the $2.6 million worth of enrichment in science?
Right.
In a nutshell. You don't have to go through the line by line, but somebody's going to want to know well, what is that?
Yeah.
What are you enriching in science for 2.6
Yeah,
million?
exactly, and my comments are really focused on the enrichment area, because I think you're right, people can get their head around end of life and capacity. People can understand that, but the enrichments, and I think pie charts that break it down that way, I mean, curriculum instruction is great, that's helpful, but if you can even make it more understandable, such as, just as an example, creating maker spaces or areas where kids can learn how to code, or just things that people can really understand what you're talking about is what I'm saying, as opposed to just things that mean a lot to us, right? It's just the packaging so that people can really get their head around it and understand whether or not that's something they want to invest in. So that's my only point, really.
Right.
One thing I would add to that, and really it's an item that Mr. Bono put on the table, recommended that when we are creating our videos and all for community, to have a picture of what our circumstances look like right now, and then what it might look like with collaborative learning spaces or with a multi-purpose facility. So we'll also have pictures that we incorporate in the video messaging to get, I think, exactly at what you're talking about. So doing that with combining the graphs, delineating enough detail but not too much detail to tell our story. And so we'll be taking some of those to the subcommittee. We'd love to have your thoughts and feedback when we get to that spot. That would be great.
If there's not, I want to address one thing if I could, Ms. Caston. Ms. Greenlaw asked a question at the last meeting about this, and I brought the data that's not on the spreadsheet. You asked about operational cost impact. What we have is we have those figures for the areas where we're adding footprint, we're adding square footage. That's $1.6 million operational impact, $1,642,496 to be exact. And that involves, now that still includes something with the non-traditional school, so that number will change. So it does include that, but that includes the operations center, which is really not bond, but that's rolling, that will roll in to it. It includes the renovation at Lake Highlands High School, Richardson High School, and the indoor practice facilities. So it does not include some of the smaller items, like if you add vehicles, there are a number of departments that have asked for additional vehicles. Well, our insurance will go up on that, our fuel costs will go up on that. If you have additional devices that get plugged into the wall, our utility costs will go up as a result of that. So we don't have those kinds of things in there, but we have the big ticket items are included. So as that refines, we'll continue to bring that forward to you. I assume what you think we've forgotten about you.
Thank you, that's great. And as you take that information out to the community, whether you use this or something else, just maybe a column that people can see that all together, what it impacts on the debt side and also what it impacts on the M&O side. Thank you, I appreciate that. And I have one other follow-up just that would help us in terms of providing names for possible people to serve on that committee, is if you could put in our folder on Edline or wherever, maybe the lists of the current committees that we have now, who's serving on the VRT, who's in the Inside our ISD class, District Planning Committee, District Technology Committee, that CTE Committee. I'm sure, I know we have them all, but if we could just plop those into one folder on our drive where we could go in and look at those again and see where there might be people in those groups or where we have no one represented from those areas, that would be helpful for us.
And we can certainly do that.
Dr. Kim?
And so just a quick clarification from Ms. Womack, and you may have said it and I missed it, or it just may be so obvious that you didn't feel like you need to say it, but I did not hear the PTA listed in the list of constituents and stakeholders that we would be taking on a listening tour to.
Yes, ma'am.
They're one of our first, as well as Education Foundation. She was just giving samples.
Yes, they're scheduled for late October. Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
So follow up to Ms. Greenaw's question about, I didn't have the benefit of being at the last meeting, so I wasn't aware there was an opportunity to provide a list of names to nominate for the committee. So is there a deadline that we need to submit the names by, or?
I think Mr. Harklewood and I would love to see some names as quickly as you have the time. By the end of the week, I think. Is that right, Mr. Harklewood?
Budget review team is scheduled for October 22nd. So we would like to have, if you have any additional names, on top of the ones we already have. We'd like to have those in enough time to be able to send out an invitation and give those folks at least 10 days, 2 weeks notice to be able to schedule them.
So just a point of clarification, are we talking about stakeholder committee or budget review team?
Well, I'm using the term synonymously. I mean, that is our stakeholder committee. We're using the budget review team. We've used them in the past for that, and we're just expanding that list of participants.
To 60?
It normally stays around there. You have some openings, and so we're able to, if you feel like we have a group that's underrepresented, I mean, certainly we can add to that list.
Okay, thank you.
We should be at about 60, which is a very large committee.
Sure. Sure. So to Ms. Greenhaw's point, if we can get those names in headline that are already on there, and
I think you've already received them, but we can put them out there again.
Ms. McKinney will send a follow-up email tomorrow morning, so with points of clarification. Won't you, Ms. McKinney? Of course she will. Thank you very much. At this time, this meeting is recessed. Let's get back as soon as we can. Stand up, take a break, get a drink if you need to. We'll come back. Thank you, everyone, for coming back. I think we're taking a roll. No, we're kidding. We're not. Hello, Dr. Gibbons. You can put that pumpkin bread down now. Okay. Dr. Wagner, at this time, our last information item for the evening is the HR annual report.
Okay, we're excited to bring you this report tonight. Really, it is combining into a comprehensive report for you guys this year, some of the series of different reports we made throughout last year. But you're going to hear an executive summary on recruiting, hiring, and promoting, teacher turnover, exit survey, and then some of the recommendations from our retention task force last year. And then Mrs. Moore is going to give you an update on our Richardson Promotes Mentoring program. That was actually kicked off with Dr. Harris last year and then continued support with Mrs. Moore this year. You'll hear some background information and some of the findings and next steps. And we've got quite a team here. We've got Mrs. Moore, we've got Mr. Quisenberry, Mrs. Kinsey, and Mr. Holland. And so Dr. Medina, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off.
Dr. Wagner, I'll keep it under 2 hours tonight. Well, I also want to thank the board really for your continued interest in this particular report. But also want to take the opportunity to really thank the team, Dr. Goodson, as well as Ms. Brandon, the executive directors, all the way down to principals and the community, because recruiting and developing and retaining truly is a collective effort. It really is a shared responsibility that we all have. And we know we do it because we value teachers, and we value our people. They're our greatest resources. They're the ones that espouse our values, are passing on our traditions, and really ensuring that we have a sustained culture of excellence in our district. And that's really what we're doing is building capacity. So with that, I'll move on to the executive summary and just share some highlights and also some challenges that we've had with our recruiting and hiring, and give Ms. Moore an opportunity as well to talk a little bit about one program that we do to develop our teachers, and that's our Richardson Promotes Mentoring program. And then I'll just somewhat wrap up with some general thoughts about our next steps. And so with that, I'll go ahead and begin. So in terms of recruiting, hiring, and promotions, some general highlights, first of all, is I wanted to let you know that the new allocations that the board did provide us not only helped us serve our needs, but really helped us stay true to our mission of serving all students. Those 55 allocations went to serving various departments in our district. In terms of a highlight, we know that the recruiting, when we're out there recruiting, our district mentoring program, Richardson Promotes Mentoring, continues to be of great interest to our new staff. We're always asked about how we support new staff members, and so we're always excited to share about our Richardson Promotes Mentoring program. We've also expanded our recruiting efforts to target not only professional conferences and recruiting events, but also our different student organizations. One that we really targeted this year with this was the BESOT, which is a bilingual student organization. Another thing that we've expanded this year has been what we're calling our instructional outreach recruiting model, in which we have partnered up with 2 universities this past year, University of Texas at Dallas, as well as Abilene Christian University. Universities that really share our values and our beliefs about innovation and instructional strategies and embedding technology, strategies such as project-based learning, and really working with them to serve 2 purposes. First of all, it serves the purpose of establishing a pipeline for us, but also it provides them with a district that is actually implementing the things that are actually taught at the university level. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward, but we did have some great outcomes from that. Today we have 20 field observers from UT Dallas who are going to be also student teaching with us next semester, and that's going to be a strong pipeline and has been historically for us. We also have student teachers. We've never had student teachers from Abilene Christian University, and this year they funded their site supervisor to come out and do their student teaching in our district, because they were very happy with what they saw in our district. As well as there's some discussions about establishing a satellite program with ACU here at Graduate Program, where they would have their student teachers serve specifically in Richardson ISD. So we were able to share a lot of great things, and they were able to see a lot of great things in Richardson. Continuing to have strong presence, we've attended 45 different events. As I mentioned earlier, we were able to hire 479 new teachers, 23 of which were our newly created classroom teacher positions. We also know that we're continuing to be an employer of choice of former RISD teachers. We know that we had 36 come back to us after a break in service. We know that our Grow Your Own programs continue to serve us well. We had 7 teachers that came back from our Grow Your Own programs, either the ETI program, the Early Teaching Internship program, the PIP programs, and such. In terms of a big goal that we had, that I sat down with Nancy and Stephen, Mr. Quisenberry and Mrs. Kinsey, in the early recruiting season, we set out to, on the first day of school, we would have all high-need positions filled on day 1. And they were very aggressive about that and working with various departments, and we were able to accomplish that goal at the secondary level and had every single high-need area filled on the first day of school. We were very close to doing that at the elementary level. We fell short of 1 bilingual teacher. And we're going to continue to work towards that effort, or towards that goal. In terms of percentages, we did have the percentage of Hispanic and Latino teachers were increased from 8 to 14%. Minority assistant principal promotions increased from 38.9 to 50%, as well as some minority principal promotions increased from 20 to 66, almost 67%. And the percentage of minority central level administrative positions promotions increased from 9 to 26.6%. So we did see a lot of positive increases in our minority hires, both at campus administration as well as at the central level. In terms of challenges, we know that attracting, although we were able to reach a lofty goal for ourselves in terms of finding high-need teachers, we know that that's going to continue to be a challenge, both in finding them and also competing for them. So we know that our stipends have served as well, but also being very creative about how we have gone about fulfilling or filling those vacancies. The percentage of African American newly hired teachers decreased from 13.7 to 6.7. And while I have shared with you that the innovative approach to the partnership that we have ACU and UTE has been a wonderful thing, it also has presented itself with challenges. It calls on us to take our instructional staff to go out to the universities and present these courses and overviews of technology integration and project-based learning. It pulls them away from their work here in the district, as well as it is a time commitment. So a lot of valuable resources are spent on that, but although we know it's for a good reason. Another challenge is the lease, and I want to celebrate this with the secondary folks, but it's really truly all of us, is that the least number and the percentages of teacher separations occurred at the secondary level, particularly at the junior high level. We saw decreases from 21% last year all the way down to 14% at the junior high level, as well as at the secondary level, going from almost nearly 19% down to 13-14%. So really want to congratulate all the work that went into that. We did see some relatively same numbers at the elementary level. The greatest number of teacher separations occurred at the elementary level, where 245 out of the 1,400 teachers left the district. And as I said, that was relatively the same as it was last year. And this year I reported out on central level type teachers, but they're teacher types. And the percentage is somewhat deceiving, but it is the highest percentage, which is 20%. But you'll notice that it's 15 out of 73. So just the sheer number of the denominator makes that percentage a little bit higher. So for your reference, when we take information from the notice of resignation, we collect it from both paraprofessionals and professionals. And collectively, when we asked them what were their reasons for separation, collectively they said it was regular retirement, other, and career advancement. When we disaggregated that data specifically for teachers, the 3 top reasons were taking a position closer to home, other, and regular teacher retirement. So with that, we will move on to what our exiting employees shared on the exit survey.
Good evening. As part of the notice of separation, there's an open URL link for exiting staff to click on where they can give further thoughts about the district. The survey covers areas such as working relationships, facilities and resources, general satisfaction, as well as future plans of the employees. This year we had a very high participation rate among our exiting employees of 95%. Overall, 84% of participants said they would recommend ISD as a place of employment for others. The first area, our working relationships. This continued to be one of our most positive areas with an overall 88% positive response rate. There was a small 2% decline in terms of positive responding compared to last year, but most of that was due to increases in neutral responding, not increases in negative responding. Most of our negative responding all of our negative responding was below 6%, with principals being the highest group there. In terms of facilities and resources, again, there was a small overall decline in positive responding among participants. There was a 1% increase in positive responses regarding textbooks. General satisfaction is where we saw our biggest increase in terms of negative responding. Areas such as teaching load, communication with the district, and schools' responses to behavioral problems had about a 5 to 6% increase in the percentage of negative responding from employees. One of the questions we ask employees is if they're going to pursue a position at another Texas public school district. Slightly over half indicated they would, 56%. Among those employees, we further break down about why they chose to leave. The number one reason is either taking a position closer to home or some type of move, either due to a spouse moving or for some reason the employee needed to move. The second highest reason at 21% is to advance their career. And then the third top reason is 15% of staff stating that they were unhappy with their job. On the other side of the remaining 44% of exiting employees that said they would not pursue a position at another Texas school district, the number one reason was a regular retirement through TRS, then 14% saying they were choosing to stay home with a child, and 9% because they went on some type of move. During the year, we switched our hosting platform from our previous survey provider, K-12 Insight, as part of the district's initiative to bring survey services in-house. The exit survey was one of those we moved over in the late spring. At that time when we switched services, and because the retention task force was a little more fleshed out at that point, we decided to ask some questions specifically regarding our retention and task force initiatives. Of those, working relationships and leadership received the most positive responses at about a 65% rate among our exiting employees. On the other side are areas such as appreciation, compensation, leadership, career advancement, all had a relatively similar percent of negative responding. The reason there's some difference there is, again, really this neutral response rate. So in other words, all our negative responding was pretty consistent across the different retention task force areas, but areas such as career advancement had about a quarter of staff indicated that they were just neutral about the career advancement opportunities in the district. So that's why there's some variation in terms of our overall positive responding across those groups.
So with that, just in some general observations and some next steps, one thing that we continue to realize is as we've gone through this work and looking at our recruiting efforts and our retention efforts and looking at the data as to why people leave, some of the intricacies of it all, one of the things that becomes very, very apparent for us is the importance of really matching what our values are with our potential applicants. You know, and a lot of we actually collectively were able to read this review that came out through the Harvard Business School, actually, really talking about the employer of choice, and really the emphasis is on, that they make, is finding this idea of shared values, and what is it that makes an employer of choice, and it's when you match those values with your people. And so, you know, one of the issues is that we can't necessarily be the employer of choice for everyone, but we can certainly be an employer of choice for those that share our values. And so as we look at all of our recruiting materials, as we look at our website, as we look at all of that, everything HR related, and really we're trying to be reflective about this, does it communicate to people what we value? And that in our ISD, as we've said time and time again, that all means all. And with that, that means that you embrace differentiation, that you know that reaching all students truly does mean all, and that we have these values about how we go about instruction and how we go about learning. And do our materials really communicate those pieces? So we've engaged with communications on a review of our materials, and to begin to align our marketing tools so that they communicate those values, so that we stand a better chance of finding people that most match, you know, our district. We had a wonderful lunch, brief lunch date, Kara and I. We talked about that this is very much like dating on a website. And sometimes when we look at our profile, does it really say who we are? Or is our picture blank and is our profile blank? And we want to be sure that we put our profile out there and that it has a clear picture of who we are. We're on the right track. We've got our teacher profile. We've got our leadership profile. We have all these profiles, but there's more to it. And so that's going to be a big piece of what we do this marketing. But we also know we have current employees, and we want to be their employer of choice. And they've spoken through the retention task force. They've given us feedback on all sorts of areas, such as compensation, such as evaluation, such as leadership, and so forth. And we have these recommendations now that we're going to make them come to life. And that's what our work is really focused on this year. And then moving on to recommendations, phase 2 and phase 3 for the coming years, so that our ISD is truly a place that they value and they feel valued and that they want to remain in our ISD. I did neglect to say that we did see a decrease in our turnover, our attrition this year, although it may not be 5 percentage points, but I believe that we're moving in the right direction. We've decreased for almost over a percentage point, so I didn't want to go without saying that. So if you have any questions.
Dr. Gill? Start. First of all, congrats. I mean, that is awesome to hear that it's trending in the direction and that the strategies and the work that you guys are deploying is working. Obviously, recruiting efforts, phenomenal, absolutely astounding. Like, you don't go to districts where they aren't like, oh yeah, I'm still looking for 60 teachers. I mean, that's awful. And to be able to give that gift to our campus leaders, thank you for that. So just want to give you guys kudos for that. Couple clarifications for you, Dr. Medina. You talked a little bit about the increases in the diversity of the people that you were hiring. I'm just wondering how close that is to reflecting what our student population is. Are there still some mismatch there that you guys are hoping to address?
So when we look at I spoke specifically about two different areas. One of them was Hispanic and one of them was African Americans. And with our African American total where we are as a result of these recruiting efforts, it's about 10% now in our district. And we know that it falls short of what our student population for African Americans as well as Hispanic, and I believe Hispanic we landed at about, it's now 12%. Keep in mind that those are snapshot dates. Our official is going to be on Peen Snapshot, and we're not quite there yet. But roughly, that's, again, it does not mirror where we are. But we have seen some shift, as I've said, we've seen some Hispanics increase to reflect closer to our Hispanic student population. So we're, like you said, also heading in that right direction, I believe.
Great, thank you. And then a couple clarifications about the exit survey that you guys did. Appreciate the results. Wondering what inferences, it may not be Mr. Holland, it might have to be him, like what it means to you, right? Like, I saw, in particular, the biggest increases in negatives around general satisfaction, some of the items around the retention task force. I mean, they're so evenly distributed. I'm just wondering what you're taking away from that and how that's influencing the work of the retention task force and the work of your team.
Well, let's start with the retention task force. And the big takeaway that I took from that is there were two big pieces, is leadership and working environment. And we know that leadership touches everything, every subcommittee that's involved with either leadership at the district level, influencing district operations and those things that we might do at the district level that impact turnover, and also leadership at the campus level, which also impacts. But leadership also has that ability to establish this working environment, how we treat our people. Also, so I make that connection. So it continues to really reinforce to me that leadership is going to be the big piece. And so I believe that the support that we've received from the board in terms of giving us that opportunity to engage in leadership development and sustaining that leadership training and so forth in the future, I think we're headed in the right direction. Some of the McCrell balanced leadership data demonstrates to us that some of the positive correlations that are made through implementing a balanced leadership model is that there's improved retention not only in the teacher ranks, but also in the administrative ranks. So it becomes a byproduct of good leadership. And so I believe, again, that we're on the right track.
Thank you, Ms. Cass. Like Dr. Kuhn just said, I think this is really good information, very well presented. Just had a couple of questions about page 3, 56% of exiting employees pursued a position with another Texas school district. I think this is one of those things that, we've talked about since I've been on the board. And 37% took another job that was closer to their home, which I wish I worked closer to my home, so I completely understand it, and I can't blame someone for not wanting to commute, especially along Central in the morning. 21% left to advance their career. I know we had, last year we had Dr. Griffin leave Bergner High School, and also Dr. Crawford leave Yale Elementary to pursue advancing their career. So I know we struggle with that in terms of trying to find a place for very qualified individuals within the district. But the 15% that left because they were unhappy with their job, I think that's interesting. And I'm wondering if compensation benefits is part of that equation, or is it something and something else, just dissatisfaction in general. Do we have any idea about that?
Yes. First of all, we know that in general, our employees tell us that although compensation is important, it's not the most important. But I don't want to I don't want to undervalue that, because I don't want to speak for every single person that's absolutely left. It's important to some people. In terms of why people left and the unsatisfaction, there's an area, a particular area in the exit survey that speaks to general satisfaction, working conditions, workload, duties. Those are the areas that are sometimes, I'm going to share that they're at times inherent with the teaching profession, but there are also areas that we work with leadership to try to control and to minimize. It's part of the balanced leadership framework. One of the areas that we work with through McCrell is an area of responsibility called discipline. And discipline brings to light the importance of safeguarding teacher time, teacher instruction, and really placing value. And the discipline, sometimes we like it to behavior, but in this case, McCrell, it's about protecting and safeguarding the instruction and safeguarding time for teachers. And so I believe that the more we bring that forward to the principals, that's going to take different shape, different form for different campuses. For some campuses, it might mean giving them more planning time, safeguarding them, and not perhaps engaging in so many after-school meetings, and really keeping a focus on instruction and their planning time. So I do believe that's all part of the general satisfaction in their working conditions.
One thing that I would add to what Dr. Medina said, sometimes that number reflects people who need to move on, because one of the things that we have really focused on, especially with our administrators in the evaluation process, is for the retention of high-performing staff, and to really invest in staff. And if we have people who aren't meeting expectations and they've been given an opportunity to improve, I mean, you know, there's pressure on people here to perform. So some of those numbers and that's not a large number, but for people who are moving on and maybe moving into another profession other than education, have provided some of the remarks in that area as well. So that's not all bad in terms of giving people an opportunity for a better fit in their life and giving us an opportunity for someone who is performing at the highest level in terms of our expectations.
And that goes along, Mr. Lynn, with the expectation of all means all. And that really requires an amount, a deepened level of planning, preparation, and a commitment. And we know that in our district, we've had a history and a long tradition of high expectations. And oftentimes, that is not everyone can rise to that expectation. And so, I concur with Dr. Wagner and agree with that, but we're also looking for that balance, and I know that Dr. Wagner has spoken to us about that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Medina. I think we've addressed these areas, so we'll be moving on.
We are moving into the next report on the Richardson Promotes Mentoring.
I'll invite Ms. Moore to come on up, and you have in front of you a great transition. This is an example. It doesn't mean that it won't change, but an example of the work that we've done with the communications department to really make this visually user-friendly. Just a really quick snapshot of what our mentor program is about, describes the responsibilities of our mentors and our mentees. So I want to thank Ms. Womack for that, and communicates that they matter. You matter. Sam.
Thank you, Dr. Medina, and good evening, board. I'm excited to present to you tonight a few highlights about the Richardson Promotes Mentoring Program, or RPM. This is the second year of the Richardson Promotes Mentoring Program, and as a new executive director, I've had a chance to learn more about the work that goes into implementing such a program. I'm going to give you a brief overview, but before I do, I wanted to tell you that our team actually had the opportunity to work with Dr. Richard Ingersoll. And Dr. Ingersoll is a leading expert and consultant to the Department of Education on teacher retention. You know, when you hear him speak, his collective research really supports comprehensive mentoring programs like the one that we've developed in Richardson. It just validates that we're on the right track in human resources with this program. And our goal is for our new teachers to unpack their bags and call our ISD home. And that is where our theme came from this year for RPM. We know that teachers are the most valuable resource that leads to student achievement. So that's what we're really working on with the program, is just helping our teachers grow. So tonight's agenda is going to give you a brief overview of our mission, celebrations and opportunities, our next steps, and then if you have any questions at the end. What is most important about the work that we're doing in the RPM program is that it is meaningful, relevant, and readily available to our novice teachers. This is what we hold ourselves accountable to and truly how we measure our success. Similar to the instructional expectations that we have in Richardson ISD for our students to learn, grow, and succeed, we also have the same expectations for our teachers to learn, grow, and succeed. These strategically designed components, as highlighted here, began this summer when our mentor leads enhanced our new teacher curriculum that is on Edline. They really worked to make sure that the teachers had relevant curriculum if they were in their second year of the program. Not only does the program help with teaching practices, we also focus on effective classroom management strategies, managing stress, motivating students, and empowering others to stay positive. So it's a well-rounded curriculum that we offer our new teachers. You'll notice that developing our leadership and building mentor capacity through valuable professional development continue to be a focus for us as well. We are also going to continue to expand our efforts for networking opportunities with our new teachers. So on October 23rd, we're going to host our second annual tailgate party. That's going to be at the Lake Highlands Freshman Center in the Circle Drive before the Bergner and Richardson game. So we hope to see you there. I've also put together a new teachers rock group for the Spirit Run on November 7th. So that will be fun for us to get together and hopefully just continue for them to build relationships with one another. At a glance, you'll notice here that we have 434 teachers that we are supporting through the RPM program. About half are in their first year of teaching, and the other half are in their second year of teaching. So it is a 2-year program. Every campus in our district is represented in this program. So that lets us know that there is work ahead of us. We want to continue to support them, develop them, and engage them in their work. Assessment is a critical part of our program, just like with anything else. And this came up earlier tonight, the many different sources that we use to gather data to measure our program effectiveness. There isn't one source. It really is a collective effort of getting all of the data together. And with this, we identify not only our celebrations, but also our challenges. Observations made by the Human Resources team, principals, mentor leads, and along with the executive leadership team are very important to us. The Campus Climate Survey and RPM Survey allowed us to ask specific questions to our mentees and our mentors about their experience with the program. Our district attrition data also allowed us to look at and identify why some of our teachers left the district. And here's what we know to be true. So there are some celebrations from last year. Last year was the first year for us to implement the program. And the mentees were saying that they knew who to go to for help. They also felt like their mentors were excellent teachers. What was really great when I looked through the data is that most of our mentees desired returning to RISD. So what we know is that they are our advocates for making our ISD an employer of choice. At the end of the day, we really want them to be confident. So if you look at the last bullet, I thought it was great that they reported that positive self-efficacy in their work, in their lesson planning, in their classroom management strategies, and working with parents and community. If we continue to build them in this capacity, then we will hit our mark. Okay, let's talk about opportunities. We recognize that our principals need more support in understanding the components of the program. I am committed, along with our executive directors, on helping our principals feel more confident, so we will provide them with some training this year. The mentees reported that they didn't always go to their mentor for instructional support, so that wasn't always their go-to person, because sometimes they're assigned a mentor who does not teach the same content area, or maybe on a different grade level. This year I worked with the Curriculum and Instruction Department and along with Staff Development Department to strategically design our mentor lead training that we had September 17th. That was specifically to address some of the concerns that the mentees had. We really want our mentor leads to feel confident reaching out to other people in the district who may have that content knowledge and can help them answer any question about instruction, so they don't have to feel like they're doing it alone. And I want to thank the Curriculum and Instruction Department, Brenda and her team. They helped me a lot with that, so I appreciate their support on that. Okay, looking at our next steps with the program, considering the implications of our data, we have developed some next steps to enhance what we're doing. And as I go into our next steps, again, we recognize that need to create demand among our leaders because we want them to feel confident about what the mentors are doing with the mentees. We want to create that demand by reflecting on our data, focusing on our mission, and developing a continued awareness of the program components. We also want to celebrate that we have some exemplars. We have some campuses who we worked with last year through a priority campus PLC, and they made great improvements on their teacher attrition rates. And so we want to celebrate them as well and use them as a resource in working with our principals this year that do have high turnover rates. We've already engaged in our mentor leads, as I spoke of earlier, by working with them and strategically designing their training. And as you may recall, from a previous curriculum update, Dr. Stone shared the instructional expectations of our district, and she mentioned that earlier tonight as well. She used a DRIVE acronym, and I feel like the Richardson Promotes Mentoring program is data-driven. It has relevant curriculum. It individualizes between first-year teachers and second-year teachers. And it offers valuable professional development. I know that we will continue to enhance our leadership, and my focus for this program is to ensure that not only that we monitor, but we also implement a very strong program so that our new teachers feel confident in the work that they do.
Just a couple of comments I would make before we start with questions. A couple things. One, this Unpack Your Bags represents some of the key messaging from our very own board president at the new teacher luncheon, and it has stuck. And that was one thing that has stuck with existing people as well as new staff members. So thank you for that messaging.
There are a lot of themes you could have chosen. I think you picked the best one, the most relevant for this, the rustic, but we won't go there. So, but love it. Thank you.
Just a couple of other things. We are year 2 into this program. Certainly, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the efforts of Dr. Harris in kicking this off last year, and did a beautiful job with some of the initiatives that were put in place. And now we have Sandra Moore in this position, and just, I think, as we said tonight, moving in the right direction in a lot of areas. So appreciate the report and really pleased with the data, and we're getting great feedback from our mentees and our mentors, and we are being purposeful and strategic and thoughtful in incorporating their suggestions and their feedback to help us make improvements in the program. So I hope this gives you guys a good snapshot of where we are and where we've been.
You know, I want to make a comment, and Ms. Greenlaw, you may want to build on this. I can remember back 5 years ago when we were saying, you know, we really do need a mentor program, a formalized mentor program in the district. And to see how far we've come in these last 18 months is phenomenal. This is a great piece, and it meets kids where they are kids. Well, as I like to say, I have sweaters older than all of the old. I think this sweater is older than most of them. So anyway, this meets our new teachers where they are, and as they look at making a decision on where they're going to make their home and unpack their bags. So you all have really accelerated this mentoring program, and I think between this and the McCrell leadership, these are things that are really going to help us attract and retain, you know, folks that are, as you say, Dr. Medina, most closely aligned with this. So this is really exciting, giving you guys lots of space and grace to do the things that you need to do, and we're seeing those benefits pay off. And that's kind of a historical perspective. You know, Ms. Greenlaw, you may want to add something to that, because you've seen it, I'm sure, cycle over your time.
No, I think you described it really well.
Oh, thank you. Anything else to add? Perfect. Anyone else, Dr. Kia? Or Mrs. Bono?
I just wanted to say I had lunch at the Rustic today and was thinking of you guys. This is awesome. I really like it. And I'm so glad to hear that it's successful, because there's no better program than mentors and mentees for building confidence and really joy in being where you are. So thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Greenlaw.
I do have a question, and it's just sort of a wonderment. When on your opportunities list, you report that mentees generally do not use their mentor as a resource for instructional support. That just seems baffling and sort of counterintuitive to me as to why wouldn't that be the first thing they would use their mentors for? And I guess classroom management and discipline, I mean, there are some things, but do we understand that a little bit as to why they don't turn to them for that, and what we can do to sort of increase that engagement somehow?
Oh, yes, ma'am, that's a great question. And like I said, that is why we use the data whenever we work with the mentor leads in their training. You know, on some campuses, you can't have a mentor, like I said earlier, who teaches the same content as you, and maybe not even the same grade level as you. So you may not go to them for an instructional question.
It could be a content thing, you know.
But I will tell you, they use them for the social support, and it's so powerful, because that's building and developing that culture where, you know, they say it's important for you to have someone you can trust at work. And I know that they're using them in that capacity, and I think sometimes that's even more powerful. But I want the mentor leads to feel confident going to anyone in curriculum and instruction, and so that's why I designed their training that way this year.
Thank you.
Dr. Kia?
Sure, thank you, and great presentation. Thank you so much. Welcome. Glad to have you. I just had a quick couple of clarifications and maybe some reflections around the program evaluation. Yeah, Mr. Holland's ears just perked up. It's like, what? And so I think it's great to see all the different data sources that you're considering. I see that there's a mix of both qualitative and quantitative stuff. I guess I'm wondering, it's back to Ms. Caston's comment earlier. What's the to and what's the from? Right? Or what's the from and what's the to? Yeah, did I get it backwards? Sorry, that was backwards. It's late. So, and to that, I mean, like, I think you probably have some short, medium, and long-term outcomes that you're anticipating as a result of this work. And I would love to be able to see those quantified in some way, like benchmark that for us so that we understand that the investment that's being made in this program is hitting the targets that you expect it to hit from qualitative and quantitative. And then the last reflection that I think I would make is that I don't see anything in here about students. And ultimately, I think the whole reason we're doing this is to make teachers more effective in the classroom. And how do we know that that's happening in the long term? And so just a reflection, put that out there for y'all to consider. Again, it's that idea that we would love to be able to celebrate with you when you hit those targets and milestones. So
I will leave the floor.
We can do that, just, it's in there, just not to the degree I think that we could do it. We talk about the teacher profile, and the teacher profile is wrapped all around relationships with students and those kinds of things, and being a match in terms of mentors and mentees and recruiting, but we can certainly do that. I just want to say, in terms of the report tonight, really proud of the staff. What we tried to do is combine several of the reports that we've given you in the past and really kind of raise it to this comprehensive level and try to pick up the key trends and great questions and comments and feedback in those areas that we can address. We'll provide that information later. And just as always, want to thank the team for their commitment to this. We absolutely own that commitment and that priority goal about becoming an employer of choice in a destination district. And we know that the staff we hire and the staff we recruit and the staff we retain are key elements in that. And so we're committed to this, and I just wanted to say that on behalf of the team.
Thank you, Dr. Ryder. Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Well done. Dr. Medina, thank you. Very, very well done. Very well done. To the team, to Mr. Quisenberry, Ms. McKenzie, Mr. Holland, thank you so much. Y'all, great job, great report, and really a lot of confidence about where we're going. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, there being no other business before this group tonight, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.